He was called the Sepia Sinatra, the Bronze Balladeer. As a crooner, Billy Eckstine sold millions of records in the years following the Second World War. As a band leader, he helped usher in a new era of modern jazz. Billy Eckstine was born 100 years ago tomorrow. Tom Vitale has his story.
Billy Eckstine was smooth as silk. He was tall and handsome. He sported a pencil-thin mustache, and he sang in a distinctive baritone.
If I told a lie, if I made you cry, when I said goodbye, I'm sorry.
I consider Billy Eckstine the Jackie Robinson of popular music.
Carrie Janelle is author of Mr. B, The Music and Life of Billy Eckstine.
Before Billy Eckstine came along, blacks, they would either sing blues, or they would be in jazz bands, or they would sing in vocal groups like the Mills Brothers or the Ink Spots. But they were not permitted to enter the domain of Perry Como and Bing Crosby. And Eckstine was the first one to successfully do that.
Eckstine began singing as a child. He was born in Pittsburgh. His family moved to Washington, D.C., where he attended Howard University. But after winning an amateur talent contest, he left college to begin his professional career. By the mid-1930s, he was singing for the popular Earl Father Hines Orchestra.
Jelly, 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 jelly stays on my mind.
Along with his vocals, Eckstine played trumpet in the Hines Orchestra, and he was interested in the new sound some of his bandmates were experimenting with in late-night jam sessions. In 1943, he left Hines to form his own band.
We were pioneering that sound, but they weren't big names. They were just guys starting out.
They were Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, and later Art Blakey and Miles Davis. Eckstine fronted the first bebop orchestra. In 1984, between sets in his dressing room at the Blue Note in New York, he told me he was proud of the music his band made, but not the name critics gave it.
I resent bebop. I resent that name. It's progressive jazz is what it was. Bebop sounds comedic to me, and it was anything but comedic. It was very studied music.
But the band, with its innovations in rhythm and harmony, was ahead of its time.
It wasn't commercial. It was too new. A lot of your so-called critics who were supposed to be authorities on what we were doing didn't know what we were doing. And so every time we'd play somewhere, we'd get bum-rapped. You know, why butt your head in the wall?
So Billy Eckstine moved to a solo career, singing popular ballads.
Who's rushing where angels fear to tread? And so I come to you, my love, my heart above my head.
Biographer Carrie Janelle says Eckstine's popularity rivaled Frank Sinatra's.
He was recording million-selling records for MGM. He was mobbed by teenage girls wherever he went. He really was a matinee idol, so to speak, in the recording industry, and had his eyes on proceeding into film and television as well.
And then, all at once, in April 1950, Eckstine's future as a crossover media star was cut short by a single photo in a Life magazine profile.
The profile featured a photograph of Eckstine coming out of a nightclub in New York City and being mobbed by white teenage girls. It looks very innocuous and very innocent. It's actually what America should be like, with no racial tension, no racial separation. But America wasn't ready for that in 1950. White America did not want Billy Eckstine dating their daughters.
Eckstine continued to record and perform, but white disc jockeys would not play his records on segregated stations.
Maybe black male singers are not supposed to sing about love. You're supposed to sing about hurt. Maybe that's what they got their hang-up in.
But Eckstine insisted he was never bitter.
To be bitter is a waste of time when you should be doing something constructive. You never get old doing something you like to do. And this is something I like to do. I mean, if you look out in the audience, see smiling people, you're bringing happiness to somebody. How many people have that privilege?
Billy Eckstine continued to bring happiness to his fans, performing in clubs and casinos until his death in 1993. For NPR News, I'm Tom Vitale in New York.
It's gone and started raining. I'm lonesome as a man can be. It's gone and started raining.
In 1957, Laurel Canyon was the official residential area of Hollywood. The few black people who lived there were rich, famous, and light-skinned enough to pass at least for Portuguese. I, on the other hand, was a little-known, dark-skinned nightclub singer who was said to have more determination than talent.
Hey, Maya.
Wilkie, my friend and voice coach, had dropped by with news.
Billie Holiday's in town. You want to meet her?
Of course. Who wouldn't?
Well, I'll bring her back here if you think you can handle it.
What's to handle? She's a woman, I'm a woman.
You know, Billie may like you. If she don't, then that's your ass. I'll take these. She'll like riding in a convertible.
He grabbed the keys to my 10-year-old Chrysler.
And you better have some gin.
Billie Holiday.
Lady Day. Here in my house. Oh, Lord.
Am I blue?
It was well known she used heavy drugs, but how could I tell her she couldn't shoot up? Her temper was legendary. I got the gin out and waited.
And these tears in
Maya, I'd like you to meet Billie Holiday.
Hello, Billie.
How do you do?
Her hand rested in mine like a rubber doll, and her bloated face held only a shadow of its familiar prettiness.
You got a nice house.
Oh, thank you.
She hadn't even looked around.
How come you living here in the White District?
I got some white friends to help me rent the place.
The Morheims. Jewish. You should have seen it, Billie. When we all rocked up here with Maya's things, the landlord was cussing and swearing about how he was going to sue. But we stood our ground. Said we'd sue right back. That shut him up.
Wilkie tells me you're a singer. You any good? You want to compete with me?
No, I don't want to compete with anybody. I'm really an entertainer.
Oh, you mean showing some titty and shaking your booty?
No, I would never do that.
Well, you better say Joe, because you sure don't know.
Billie, you got to see her before you talk. She sings folk songs, calypso, and blues. Now, you know me. If I say she's good, I mean it. And she's nice enough to invite us to lunch, so get up off of her, or you can walk your ass right down this hill.
You haven't changed a damn thing but last year's drawers. I knew you'd put my ass out on the street sooner or later. What are we having to eat, baby?
I hadn't thought about food.
I'm making fried chicken, rice, and Arkansas gravy.
Well, you better fry that sucker till he's ready, 'cause I can't stand the goddamn rare chicken.
But the people, I hear they pretty.
They talked for hours as Billie worked on the bottle of gin I'd found. I didn't speak unless directly spoken to.
Pass me another drumstick. This is good chicken.
And after the meal...
Now, Billie, I have a student coming in a half hour. I'll take you back to your hotel. Thanks, Maya. We have to go.
Speak for yourself. All I got to do is stay black and die.
Well, I brought you here, so I'll take you back. Anyway, Maya's probably got something to do.
They both stared at me.
No, I'm free. I'll take her back to the hotel when she wants to go.
So, I see you when I see you, Wilkie. Hope it won't be another 20 years.
I'll see you, Maya.
Bye, Wilkie.
Cigarette?
Thanks.
You a square, ain't you, Maya?
Yes.
Then how come you invited me to your house?
Because you're a great artist and I respect your work.
Bullshit. You just wanted to see what I look like up close.
No, I really...
That's all right. That don't hurt my feelings. You know, I used to be a bitch on wheels. You know how folks talk. They'll tell you anything to get what they want. Of course, there are them that'll just strong-arm you and take it. Men, men can't really do it to you. Women can, too.
Don't you have any friends?
Of course I have friends. The person who don't have friends might as well be dead.
Hey, Mom, what's for dinner?
You got a kid?
Yes.
I can't stand kids.
I'm starving.
Guy, I have a guest. This is Miss Billie Holiday.
Good afternoon, Miss Holiday. I'm happy to know you.
He held out his hand to her.
I read about you in a magazine. They said the police had been giving you a hard time, and that you had a very hard life. Is that true? What do they do to you? Is there anything you can do back? I mean, sue them or anything?
She still hadn't taken his hand, so he reached down and took hers and shook it.
Maybe they expect too much from you, Miss Holiday. I know something about that. When I come home from school, I have to water the lawn. But if there's wind, water gets blown back in your face. We live on the side of the mountain, so if I get wet, Mom always thinks I've been playing with a hose. Will you come and talk to me when I've changed?
Well,
I'd really like to know everything about you. Wait there. I'll be back in a minute.
Damn. He's something, ain't he?
When Guy came back, Billie went outside and watched him water the lawn. She stayed for dinner and talked all the while.
Old Joe is a mean son of a bitch, but I would have died for him. We went our separate ways once we was busted. I knew what Lewis did. He was my third husband. Mafia business. That was bad. After what the paper said, how I was supposed to despise L. Fitzgerald, I actually live with my songs before I can sing. Singing's gotta mean something.
Billie had come to my house 4 days straight, each time bringing along her little chihuahua, Pepe.
This song is called Strange Fruit.
She talked all day long and sang a song to my son each night.
It's a very important song, so listen good.
Guy stood awkwardly, trying not to look bored.
Southern trees bear strange fruit.
Mom?
Blood on the leaves and blood at the root.
Her rasping voice and phrasing enchanted me.
How can there be blood at the root?
Shh, just listen. Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze.
I could see every image.
Strange fruit hanging.
The lynch victim's blood.
From the poplar tree.
Glide onto the leaves.
Pastel scene of the gallant South.
Down to the roots of the southern trees.
The bulging eyes.
Mom?
And the twisted mouth.
What's the pastoral scene?
Scent of magnolia, sweet and fresh.
Mom?
Shh. Then the sudden smell of burning flesh.
Mom? What's a pastoral scene?
It means when the crackers take a little kid like you and snatch up his nuts and shove them down his goddamn throats. That's what it means. That's what they do. That's a goddamn pastoral scene.
I'm going to bed.
Excuse me.
I went after him to his room.
Guy, I'm sorry. She didn't mean what she said. She's not good with kids.
Good night, Mom.
Good night.
What's eating you?
Billie, you upset my son.
I didn't lie. Did I? Did I lie on the crackers?
I looked at her. She really didn't see it.
I ain't going back to the hotel.
Where do you want me to take you? I need to get to work.
But let me see you act. What's Wilkie say you sing? Calypso?
I don't think it's your kind of thing.
It's got a beat, ain't it?
Ladies and gentlemen, I have some news for you about a very special person in the audience tonight. I think everyone will be excited to know that Miss Billie Holiday is present.
People started looking around the room for her. She looked straight at me, and then, picking up Pepe, stood up. She turned to the audience and bowed her head 2 or 3 times, and then sat down without smiling.
Now, I'd like to sing you a song you're all familiar with, and you all know the chorus.
Loey, 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 poor Joey, 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 Mo and Joe run the dance.
Stop that bitch! Stop her! God damn it! She sounds just like my goddamn mama.
She picked up Pepe and headed through the crowd toward the women's lavatory. That was twice in one night the woman had upset me, and she wasn't going to get away with it. She was looking at her reflection in the mirror when I came in.
Billie, let me tell you something.
Oh, that's all right about the song. You can't help how you sound. Most colored women sound alike, unless they're trying to sound white. Did you see that old bitch hit it out of here? She was sitting on the toilet, and when I opened the door, she screamed at me, "Shut the door!" So I screamed right back, "If you wanted it shut, you should have locked the goddamn thing." Then she comes out of there and asks me, "Ain't you Billie Holiday?" I told her, "Bitch, I didn't ask you your name. You should have seen her fly." You know, when you introduced me, you know why they all standing up.
They were honoring you.
You don't know a damn thing. They wanted to see my black ass because I've been in jail for dope. You want to be famous, don't you?
Yes, I do.
You're going to be famous, but it won't be for singing.
Listen
now,
here,
wait,
but...
you already know you can't sing all that good. But you're going to be real famous. Well, you better start asking yourself right now, when I get famous, who can I trust? Because all whites is bad and blacks ain't much better. Just take care of your son. Keep on telling him he's the smartest thing God made. Maybe he'll grow up without hating you. Remember, Billie Holiday told you, you can't get too high for somebody to bring you down.
For weeks afterwards, Guy treated me coolly, as though I had betrayed him.
Hey, hold on. Where are you going?
Just out.
Well, we still haven't talked about what you want to do for summer.
I haven't made my mind up yet.
Guy, what do you think about Billie Holiday?
She was okay.
And that's all you thought?
Well, she cursed a lot. It's no wonder people don't like her.
So you didn't like her?
Anybody who curses all the time is stupid. Oh, yeah. And when I grow up, I'm not gonna let anybody, no matter how famous she is, I'm not gonna let anybody curse at my children.
Let's say that our little show is over, and so...
Not long after, Billie Holiday died in a New York hospital. All the jazz and rhythm and blues stations had oily-voiced commentators extolling the virtues of the great artist whose like would not be seen or heard again. But I would remember forever the advice of a lonely, sick woman with a waterfront mouth who sang songs to a 13-year-old boy.
You can forget. Don't worry about me. I love you, Hoggy. Take me. Don't let him handle me and drive me mad. If you can keep me, I want to stay here with you forever, and I'll be glad.
Stay black, stay black, stay black, stay black. 2025, stay black. Katherine Massey Book Club, Context of White Supremacy, the worthless Negro from Virginia. Gus T, Renegade, and for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information with non-white people, victims of white supremacy, on what white supremacy racism is and how it works. That is Billie Holiday, Porgy, and Bess from the soundtrack, I guess. For something so old, I think, wow, they had a hot soundtrack. Did Diddy do a remix on the Porgy and Bess track? Man. Anyway, that is Porgy and Bess. I Love You, Billie and Holiday. Man, they always got to have a hot, even Hustle and Flow. That's when Dr. Welsing, one time she talked about Porgy and Bess. She was relating it to Hustle and Flow. Terrence Howard, my black brother, thespian extraordinaire. But she was saying that they will always promote these sort of films, projects where you have down and out black people who revel in their poverty and sometimes even make songs about how wonderful it is to be Negro and poor. Stay black, stay black, stay black. Anyway, we are picking up installment number 2, Dr. Maya Angelou, the Grandcestor, the Heart of a Woman. Last week we left off midpoint of chapter 2. One thing I will point out quickly, this might even be something to pay attention to in this text as we're kind of going slowly through this time period. We have not had exemplary black parenting in the last 2 black books, autobiographies. We had Andrée Blouin, who left her child, presumably with white people, in Europe while she went back to the continent and was doing, you know, whatever else, amidst, you know, other illustrations. And I mean, doing the best that you can after you've been raped by a white man, doing the best that you can, but still left with white people in Europe while you're off doing whatever. And then we come back here and Dr. Angelou left her child in California while she goes to get a job last week. Like, just, hey, got other things to do. It's wacky times in the 60s, you know. Somebody will have to look after the child. Like, wow. When you play around with sex, woo, best of luck to your black offspring. Back to back. Yee. Anyway. So we left off in chapter 2, the audio that we picked up at number 1, Billie Eckstine, the sepia Sinatra. See, they get these old tacky terms just to call attention to the fact that you are not white. There's something niggardly about you, even though Billie Eckstine was talking about, I'm not sitting around being bitter because I'm a victim of racism, trying to do something constructive, sounding like Neely Fuller Jr. Shout to Neely Fuller Jr., producejustice.com. Fuller remembered that exactly. That's one of the first conversations, like phone conversations, that I ever had with Neely Fuller Jr. This is like autumn 2007, the days within the Cows came into existence as a talk radio counter-racist broadcast. And I spoke with Mr. Fuller on the telephone, and he said, he talked about Billie Eckstine, and he mentioned that photograph exactly. In fact, I remember going to the library to go find that photograph, and I think I have seen it, but it was 2007. But he remembered it exactly, and he was talking about events that were 50 years past. Like, I've seen that with Fuller repeatedly, where he will have often, like, totally accurate memory for events that are decades, sometimes even a half century past. He will have total accurate recall, names, everything about what happened. If it's related to white supremacy, racism, like, oh yeah, like I might even have files about it. I mean, literally, he might even have files about that sometimes. But Billie Eckstine and everything went to pot. Crooning or not, white women and I thought it was important that he pointed out terms as well. He said he always resented them referring to his music as bebop. He said it was progressive jazz. Like, what? Nigga, you are really being mannish and too big for your britches. This is some old nigger music and whatever. You ought to be lucky we call it bebop. But they do that with the language all the time. We got baseball. We got the nigger leagues. See? We got the sepia Sinatra. See? That's even why it's the black O.J. Simpson. Because O.J. saw it. He said, hey, I'm not with the niggers. I'm special. Okay. I'm going along with that. No problem. I am the black O.J., the sepia O.J. Simpson, if you will. See, they do that with the language all the time. Nobody does it better. Racist man, racist woman, racist child. We will get to it. Midpoint of chapter 2. You can see if there are other similarities, comparison, contrasts with the previous memoir, even the parenting that we've heard, because a lot of this is revolved about taking care of black children, right? So we'll see if there are similarities to go. Children taking care of children both ways, right? Eeh. 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 Oh, wait a minute. I got one pause. I got one major pause. That was a BBC report that we heard. Second, they have a full, because Dr. Maya Angelou did a autobiography series. There are 7 books in that autobiography series. We read book number 1, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, in 2014. This, The Heart of a Woman, is book number 4 in that series. The BBC has a documentary series where they kind of dramatize the text of her different autobiographies, and that was what you heard from their segment on The Heart of a Woman. I just thought that would be fascinating to hear it, dramatized, and some of the scenes that we heard last week. It took me hearing that from my brain computer to process, wait a minute, when Billie Holiday is singing Strange Fruit to Dr. Angelou's son, Guy, he is 13 years old. This is 1959. Emmett Till was lynched in 1955 at 14 years old. Once that registered in my brain computer this time, for some reason I thought he was like 9 or something like that. At 13, my thinking about this is radically different. At 13, your focus as a 13-year-old black child should not be on what is the popular scene and how is the blood if you are a smart, informed 13-year-old child and you've read newspaper reports about Billie Holiday, there is no way in the world you missed all those newspaper reports about Emmett Till. And there's no way, if you read about Billie Holiday, that you could miss her seminal song, Strange Fruit, and what that song is about if you are a smart 13-year-old boy, which by all accounts Guy was. That is the total incorrect focus to be, oh, she said a bad word. How was blood, like, what? You are a 13-year-old. We are just like 2 years removed from Emmett Till, 4, sorry, if it's 59, from Emmett Till being lynched. What? In fact, I was thinking when he walks to go in his bed, like, I'm like when I finally got it, it took a week from my retarded brain computer to wait a minute. He was 13 because I was thinking he was 9, like 13. My immediate response was, if you don't get your sensitive ass up out of that bed and go in there and apologize to Billie Holiday, like, my bad, Bill. I was thinking, I have not been on my job as a parent. Like, wow. Emmett Till Emmett Till was lynched at 14. You're 13, and this is your thinking? I have not been on my job as a parent, which I just said. You weren't even here. You left your child to go gallivanting and doing whatever in New York. I'm gonna see if I could be a writer or whatever. Like, come on. That's what I was thinking, like, at 9, maybe. Oh, she cursed. Oh, my sensitive ears. Oh, sounded like when we read Mr. Dunn's book, Harry Dunn's book last year. Y'all said all that gratuitous foul language. Oh, I'm thinking he's 9, like, yeah, Billy, come on. He is 13. You are not a little, but man, If you don't get your sensitive hind parts out of that bed and go in there and apologize to Billie, and shut up. Don't say nothing else. Be quiet. He'd have been doubly traumatized. I don't have children. They said, thank God he does not have children. Lord Jesus. Dang, 2 times trying. Woo, but forget trauma, like bad parenting. She left that child there all that time. If social services had come by, a la Richard Williams, Venus and Serena, or Minister Malcolm X, if social services had stopped by, it would have been way worse trauma than, Billie Holiday said Phil Florin and was in here sounding like Sue Africa. I'm going to bed. Bad black parenting, which is a hallmark of Negro. Facts. We should say that. You know, stay black. Bad parenting.
Stay black.
Katherine Massey Book Club. Context of White Supremacy.
Bulging eyes and the twisted mouth, scent of magnolia, sweet and fresh. Then the sudden smell of burning flesh. Here is a fruit for the crows to pluck, for the rain to gather, for the wind to suck, for the sun to rise, for the tree to drop.
Guy, you know I love you, and I try to be a good mother. I try to do the right thing, but I'm not perfect. His silence agreed. I hope you'll remember whenever I've done something that hurts you that I do love you and it's not my intention. He was studying my face, listening to the tone of my voice. Mom, I relaxed a little. Mother was formal, cold, disapproving. Mom meant closeness, forgiveness. Mom, I know you do the best you can. And I'm not really angry. It's just that Los Angeles. Did Ray do anything? Mistreat you? Oh no, Mom. He moved about a week after you left. You mean you lived alone? Shock set my body into furious action. Every normal function accelerated. Tears surfaced and clouded my vision. Guy lost half his age, and suddenly he again was a little boy of 7 who slept with a butcher's knife under his pillow one summer at camp. What did he slip under his pillow in Los Angeles while I partied safely in New York? My baby. Oh, honey, why didn't you tell me when I phoned? I would have come back. Now his was the soothing voice. You were trying to find a job and a house. I wasn't afraid. But Guy, you're only 14. Suppose something had happened to you? He stood silent and looked at me, evaluating my distress. Suddenly, he crossed the room and stopped beside my chair. Mom, I'm a man. I can look after myself. Don't worry. I'm young, but I'm a man. He stood, bent, and kissed me on the forehead. I'm going to change the furniture around. I want my desk facing the window. He walked down the hall. The black mother perceives destruction at every door, ruination at each window, and even she herself is not beyond her own suspicion. She questions whether she loves her children enough, or more terribly, does she love them too much? Do her looks cause embarrassment, or even more terrifying, is she so attractive her sons begin to desire her and her daughters begin to hate her? If she is unmarried, the challenges are increased. Her singleness indicates she has rejected or has been rejected by her mate. Yes, she is raising children who will become mates. Beyond her door, all authority is in the hands of people who do not look or think or act like her and her children. Teachers, doctors, sales clerks, librarians, policemen, welfare workers are white and exert control over her family's moods, conditions, and personality. Yet within the home, she must display a right to rule which at any moment, by a knock at the door or a ring of the telephone, can be exposed as false. In the face of these contradictions, she must provide a blanket of stability which warms but does not suffocate, and she must tell her children the truth about the power of white power without suggesting that it cannot be challenged. Hey, Mom, come and see. Every piece of furniture was in a new place, and the room looked exactly the same. Like it? After dinner, I'll play you a game of Scrabble. Where is the dictionary? What are we having for dinner? Does the television work? Gee, I'm famished. My son was home and we were a family again. The Harlem Writers Guild was meeting at John's house, and my palms were sweating and my tongue was thick. The loosely formed organization, without dues or membership cards, had one strict rule. Any invited guest could sit in for 3 meetings, but thereafter the visitor had to read from his or her work in progress. My time had come. Sarah Wright and Sylvester Leek stood in a corner talking softly. John Clark was staring at titles in the bookcase. Mary Delaney and Millie Jordan were giving their coats to Grace and exchanging greetings. The other writers were already seated around the living room in a semicircle. John Killens walked past me, touching my shoulder, took his seat and called the meeting to order. Okay, everybody, let's start. Chairs scraped the floor and the sounds reverberated in my armpits. As you know, our newest member, our California singer, is going to read from her new play. What's the title, Maya? One Love. One Life? My usually deep voice leaked out high-pitched and weak. A writer asked how many acts the play had. I answered again in the piping voice. So far, only 1. Everyone laughed. They thought I was making a joke. If everyone is ready, we can begin. John picked up his notepad. There was a loud rustling as the writers prepared to take notes. I read the character and said description despite the sudden perversity of my body. The blood pounded in my ears, but not enough to drown the skinny sound of my voice. My hands shook so that I had to lay the pages in my lap, but that was not a good solution due to the tricks my knees were playing. They lifted voluntarily, pulling my heels off the floor, and then trembled like disturbed jello. Before I launched into the play's action, I looked around at the writers, expecting but hoping not to see their amusement at my predicament. Their faces were studiously blank. Within a year, I was to learn that each had a horror story about a first reading at the Harlem Writers Guild. Time wrapped itself around every word, slowing me. I couldn't force myself to read faster. The pages seemed to be multiplying even as I was trying to reduce them. The play was dull, the characters unreal, and the dialogue was taken entirely on the back of a Campbell's soup can. I knew this was my first and last time at the guild. Even if I hadn't the grace to withdraw voluntarily, I was certain the members had a method of separating the wheat from the chaff. The end. At last, the members laid their notes down beside their chairs, and a few got up to use the toilets. No one spoke. Even as I read, I knew the drama was bad, but maybe someone would have lied a little. The room filled. Only the whispering of paper shifting told me that the jury was ready. John Henrik Clark, a taut little man from the South, cleared his throat. If he was to be the first critic, I knew I would receive the worst sentence. John Clark was famous in the group for his keen intelligence and bitter wit. He had supposedly once told the FBI that they were wrong to think that he would sell out his home state of Georgia. He added that he would give it away, and if he found no takers, he would even pay someone to take it. One life, one love. His voice was a rasp of disbelief. I found no life and very little love in the play from the opening of the act to its unfortunate end. Using superhuman power, I kept my mouth closed and my eyes on my yellow pad. He continued, his voice lifting. In 1879, on a March evening, Alexander Graham Bell successfully completed his attempts to send the human voice through a little wire. The following morning, some frustrated playwright, unwilling to build the necessary construction plot, began his play with a phone call. A general deprecating murmur floated in the air. "Oh, John. And don't be so mean, and... Ooh, John, you ought to be ashamed." Their moans were facetious, mere accompaniment to their relish. Grace invited everyone to drinks, and the crowd rose and started milling around while I stayed in my chair. Grace called to me. "Come on, Maya. Have a drink. You need it." I grinned and knew movement was out of the question. Killens came over. "Good thing you stayed. You got some very important criticism." He, too, could slide to hell straddling a knotted greasy rope. "Don't just sit there. If they think you're too sensitive, you won't get such valuable criticism the next time you read." The next time? He wasn't as bright as he looked. I would never see those snooty bastards as long as I stayed black and their asses pointed toward the ground. I put a nasty sweet smile on my face and nodded. "That's right, Maya Angelou, show them you can take anything they can dish out. Let me tell you something." He started to sit down beside me, but mercifully another writer called him away. I measured the steps from my chair to the door. I could make it in 10 strides. "Maya, you've got a story to tell." I looked up into John Clark's solemn face. "I think I can speak for the Harlem Writers Guild. We're glad to have you. John Killens came back from California talking about your talent. Well, in this group, we remind each other that talent is not enough. You've got to work. Write each sentence over and over again until it seems you've used every combination possible, then write it again. Publishers don't care much for white writers." He coughed or laughed. "You can imagine what they think about black ones. Come on, let's get a drink." I got up and followed him without a first thought. 10 different conversations were being held in the kitchen. The writers were partying. Gone were the sober faces and serious eyes. As John Clark and I entered, another writer spoke to me. "So, Maya, you lived through your baptism. Now you're a member of the flock." Sarah, a pretty little woman with fastidious manners, put her hand on my arm. "They were easy on you this evening, dear. Soft, you might say, because it was your first reading. But you'll see, next week you watch how they treat Sylvester." Paul Marshall, whose book Brown Girl, Brown Stones was going to be made into a television movie, smiled conspiratorially. "See, I told you, it wasn't too bad, was it? They had stripped me, flayed me, utterly and completely undone me, and now they were as cheery as Christmas cards." I sipped the cool wine and thought about the evening's instruction. Because I had a fairly large vocabulary and had been reading constantly since childhood, I had taken words and the art of arranging them to lightly. The writers has assaulted my casual approach and made me confront my intention. If I wanted to write, I had to be willing to develop a kind of concentration found mostly in people awaiting execution. I had to learn technique and surrender my ignorance. John Killens interrupted my thoughts. "Maya, how long will it take you to rewrite that play?" I hadn't decided on a rewrite or even whether I would attend another guild meeting. "I need to know so I can schedule your next reading." "I'm not sure. Let me think about it. There are a lot of people ready to read. You'd better decide, otherwise you'll have to get in line. I'll call you tomorrow." John nodded and turned away. He lifted his voice. "Okay, everybody. What about Cuba? What about Castro? Are we going to sit back and watch the United States kick Castro's ass like it's been kicking our ass and say nothing?" In the second following John's question, the air held quiet, free of chatter. Then voices rose. "All black people ought to support Castro. Cuba is all right. Castro is all right. Castro acts like he grew up in Harlem. He speaks Spanish, but it could be niggerese." John waited until the voices fell. "There's no time like right now. You know about the slave who decided to buy his freedom?" Small smiles began to grow on the black, brown, and yellow faces. Grace chuckled and bit into her cigarette holder. Well, this Negro was a slave, but his owner allowed him to take jobs of the plantation at night, on weekends and holidays. He worked. Now, mind you, I mean, he would work on the plantation and then walk 15 miles to town and work there, then walk back, get 2 hours sleep, and get up at daybreak and work again. He saved every penny. Wouldn't marry, wouldn't even take advantage of the ladies around him. Afraid he'd have to spend some of his hard-earned money. Finally, he saved up $1,000. Lot of money. He went to his master and asked how much he was worth. The white man asked why the question. The Negro said he just wanted to know how much slaves cost. The white man said he usually paid $800 to $1,200 for a good slave, but in the case of Tom, because he was getting old and couldn't father any children, if he wanted to buy himself, the master would let him go for $600. Tom thanked the slave owner and went back to his cabin. He dug up his money and counted it. He fondled and caressed the coins and then put them back in their hiding place. He returned to the white man and said, "Boss, freedom is a little too high right now. I'm going to wait till the price come down." We all laughed, but the laughter was acrid with embarrassment. Most of us had been Toms at different times of our lives. There had been occasions when the price of freedom was more than I wanted to pay. Around the room faces showed others also were remembering. There is a fair play for Cuba organization. An ad is going to be taken out in the daily newspapers. The ad will cost money. Anyone who wants to sign it can end the form in the living room. Put your name down, and if you can afford to, leave some money in the bowl on the cocktail table. A few people began to move hurriedly toward the front room, but John stopped them. Just a minute. I just want to remind you all that if your name appears in the ad this afternoon, you can bet $10,000 and a sucker that by nightfall it'll be in the FBI files. You'll be suspect. Just remember that. John Clark coughed his laugh again. Hell, if you're born black in the United States, you're suspect of being everything except white, of course. We laughed, relieved at the truth told in our own bitter wit. I thought of lines in Sterling Brown's poem, Strong Men. We followed away and laughed as usual. They heard the laugh and wondered. Just before I left the house, I signed the already filled application form. Paul Marshall stopped me at the door. "I really want to hear your rewrite. You know, lots of people have more talent than you or I. Hard work makes the difference. Hard, unrelenting work." The meeting was over. Members were embraced, kissed lips or cheeks, and patted each other. John Killens offered to drive me home. Grace hugged me and whispered, "You did good, kid, and I know you were scared witless." When John parked in front of my house, I gathered my papers and asked, "What's the hardest literary form, John?" "Each one is the hardest. Fiction is impossible. Ask me. Poetry is impossible. Ask Langston or County. Baldwin will say essays are impossible. But everyone agrees short stories are so impossible they almost can't be written at all." I opened the car door. "John, put me down for a reading into months. I'll be reading a new short story. Good night." I thought about my statement as I walked up the stairs. I had gathered from the evening's meeting that making a decision to write was a lot like deciding to jump into a frozen lake. I knew I was going in, so I decided I might as well try what John Killens suggested as the deepest end, the short story. If I survived at all, it would be a triumph. If I swam, it would be a miracle. As I unlocked my door, I thought of my mother putting her age back 15 years and going into the Merchant Marines. I had to try. If I ended in defeat, at least I would be trying. Trying to overcome was black people's honorable tradition. Chapter 3. There is an awesome reality to rent day. It comes trumpeting, forcing the days before it into a wild scramble. My rent day seemed to come due every other day, and I always needed just one more pair of jeans. The clothes I had to have were eternally in the cleaners, and staples disappeared from my kitchen with an alarming regularity. I could get a job singing, but I didn't have an agent. Harlem theatrical representatives sought light-skinned Cotton Club-type beauties for their traveling reviews. Midtown white agents would only book unknown black entertainers for out-of-town or night gigs, stag parties, or smokers. I knew one white New York club owner who had been a loyal friend to me, but with my recently acquired new level of black dignity, I refused to go pleading to him for work. I found a job on my own. The little club on the Lower East Side was a joint where people came when they didn't have any other place to go. There was a long bar, diluted drinks, dinner plate-sized tables, and no dressing rooms. I changed in the women's toilet, and the work itself embarrassed me. I sang in the club for 2 miserable months. People I admired were doing important things. Abby and Max Roach were performing jazz concerts on liberation themes. Lorraine Hansberry had a play on Broadway which told some old truths about the Black American Negro family to a new white audience. James Baldwin had the country in his bald street with the fire next time. Killings, and then we heard the thunder told the uncomfortable facts about black soldiers in a white army. Belafonte included the South African singer Miriam Makeba in his concerts, enlarging his art and increasing his protest against racial abuse. And I was still singing clever little songs only moderately well. I made the decision to quit show business, give up the skin-tight dresses and manicured smiles, the false concern over sentimental lyrics. I would never again work to make people smile inanely and would take on the responsibility of making them think. Now was the time to demonstrate my own seriousness. 2 weeks after my arm decision, I received an offer to appear at the Apollo Theater, and the idea of rejecting the invitation never occurred to me. The Apollo in Harlem was to black entertainers the Met, La Scala, and a Royal Command performance combined. Pearl Bailey, Dizzy Gillespie, Count Basie, Duke Ellington had played on that stage. Frank Sheeman, the manager, sat in the darkened theater listening to rehearsal. Tito Puente's big band with Willie Bobo and Mongo Santamaria dropped dancing notes in the air like dust particles in a windstorm. Schiffman sat rigid in the Ost row. I rehearsed my songs with the band, spurred on by the timbals of Willie Bobo and Mongo Santamaria's conga. I enlarged on my initial interpretation of the music, singing better than I was usually capable of. Schiffman didn't move or speak until I started to rehearse. Uhuru, an audience participation song which I used as an encore. No audience participation in the Apollo. His voice was as rusty as an old iron bar. I beg your pardon? Always get sidity when you're scared was my policy. Were you speaking to me? Yeah, no audience participation in the Apollo. But that's my act. I always use Uhuru as an encore. The word means freedom in Swahili. Babatunde Olatunji, the great Nigerian drummer, taught it to me. No audience participation. Is that your policy, Mr. Sheeman? If so, a few musicians rustled sheet music. Others talked in Spanish. It's not a policy. The only policy in the Apollo is be good. I'm telling you no audience participation because Apollo audiences won't go along with it. You'll die. Die on the stage if you try to get this audience to sing with you. He gave a little laugh and continued. Most of them can sing better than you anyway. A few musicians who understood English laughed. Many people could sing better than I, so Schiffman had told me nothing I didn't already know. Thanks for your advice. I'm going to sing it anyway. It'll be a miracle if they don't laugh you on the stage. He laughed again. Thank you. I turned back to the orchestra. I don't have sheet music, but the song goes like this. I didn't expect Schiffman to know that my life, like the lives of other Black Americans, could be credited to miraculous experiences. But there was one other thing I was sure he didn't know. Black people in Harlem were changing, and the Apollo audience was black. The echo of African drums was less distant in 1959 than it had been for over a century. 125th Street was to Harlem what the Mississippi was to the South, a long traveling river always going somewhere, carrying something. A furniture store ordering gaudy sofas and fake leopard skin chairs shouldered Mr. Michaud's bookshop, which prided itself on having or being able to get a copy of any book written by a black person since 1900. It was true that sportily dressed fops stood on 125th and 7th Avenue saying, "Got horse for the course and coke for your hope." But across the street, conservatively dressed men told concerned crowds of the satanic nature of whites and the divinity of Elijah Muhammad. Black women and men had begun to wear multicolored African prints. They moved through the Harlem streets like bright sails on a dark sea. I also knew that fewer people giggled or poked the sides of their neighbors when they noticed my natural hairstyle. Clever appliance store owners left their TV sets on the channels broadcasting affairs. I had seen black people standing in front of the stores watching the faces of international diplomats. Although no sound escaped into the streets, the attentive crowds appeared. I had waited with a group of strangers one night near St. Nicholas Avenue. The mood was hopeful, as if a promise was soon to be kept. The crowd tightened, pulled itself closer together and toward the window as a small dark figure appeared on all the screens at once. The figure was that of an African wearing a patterned toga, striding with theatrical dignity toward the camera. The sidewalk audience was quiet but tense. When the man's face was discernible and the part in his hair distinct, the crowd began to talk. "Hey, Alex. Hey, brother. He's a good-looking thing. That African walk like God himself. Humph. Ain't that something?" The man's mouth moved and the crowd quieted as if lip-reading. Although it was impossible to understand his message, his air of disdain was not lost on the viewers. One fat woman grinned and giggled. "I sure wish I knew what that pretty nigger was saying." A man near the back of the crowd grunted. "Hell, he's just telling all the crackers in the world to kiss his black ass." Laughter burst loudly in the street. Laughter immediate and self-congratulatory. Schiffman had been in Harlem since the beginning of the Apollo. He had given first contracts to a number of black performers who went on to become internationally famous. Some people in the area said he was all right and he had black friends. He understood who was running numbers, who was running games, and who was square and respectable. But he wasn't black. And he was too mired in the Harlem he had helped to fashion to believe that the area was moving out of his control and even beyond his understanding. Uhuru was definitely going to be my encore. Fortunately, my first show was at 1 o'clock on a Monday afternoon. About 40 people sat staggered in an auditorium which could hold 700. Tito Punt's big band echoed in the room with the volume of an enlarged symphony orchestra. The comedian delivered his jokes for his own amusement, and the small audience responded as if he were a favorite nephew entertaining in the family living room. The tap dancer sent a private message in heel and toe code, and the audience sent back its answer in applause. The male singer sang a Billie Eckstine-like arrangement, and he was well received. I walked onto the stage wearing my sky blue chiffon gown, and the blue high heels dyed to match. The first few calypso songs elicited only polite responses, but when I sang a southern blues, long on moaning and deep in content, the audience shouted back to me, "Tell the truth, baby." And sing Tall Skinny Mama. Sing your song. I was theirs and they were mine. I sang the race memory, and we were united in centuries of belonging. My last song was Baba Furu, a Cuban religious song taught to me by Mambo Santa Maria a year earlier when I had joined Punt on a tour of 6 Eastern theaters. Speaking only a few words of English, Mambo taught me the song syllable by syllable. Although he couldn't translate the lyrics, he said the song was used in Black Cuban religious ritual. That first Apollo audience consisted of grandparents raising the children of their own absent children, and young women on welfare, too good to steal and too timid to whore, and young men made unnecessary. The Afro-Cuban song ignored hope and laid itself down in despair. The blue notes humped themselves and became the middle passage. They attended and moaned about poverty and how it felt to be hated. The Apollo audience shouted. They had understood. When I returned and announced that my encore was another African song called in Swahili, Freedom, they applauded, ready to go with me to that wish for land. I explained, if you believe you deserve freedom, if you really want it, if you believe it should be yours, you must sing. Yuhu uhuru, oh ye freedom, yuhu uhuru, oh ye freedom, aha hum. Willie Bobo, Mongo, and Giuliano set for 4, 5/4 and 6/4 times on conga, timbales, and caracas, and I started singing. I leaned back on the rhythms and began. Oh sawaba hum, oh sawaba hum, oh sawaba hum. I joined the audience on the refrain. Oh yay, freedom, ahuha hum. Ahum. The audience sang passionately. They were under my voice, before my voice. Understanding beyond my own understanding. I was the singer, the entertainer, and they were the people who were enduring. They accepted me because I was singing the anthem and carrying the ag. By evening of the Oste, I saw the power of the black grapevine. During the 6 o'clock show, someone screamed from the audience. Sing freedom, sing freedom. It was my encore, so I had to sing the routine of playing songs. The audience clapped until I returned. I began. If you believe you deserve freedom, if you, aha uhuru ye freedom, aha uhuru ye freedom, aha uhuru ye freedom, aha, oh ye freedom. The audience had it and gone. Just a minute. Some of you all know the song, but let me explain it to the folks who don't know. A voice from the audience screamed. All right, but don't wait for slowpokes. We ready to sing. I continued with my explanation and the drums began. The audience pounded out the rhythm, moving it, controlling and possessing the music, the orchestra and me. Oh yay, freedom, uh-huh. As the song ended, the small crowd thundered a hot appreciation. Even as I bowed, I knew the applause was only in a small part for me. I had been merely the ignition which settled their ray. It was our history, our painful passage and uneven present that burned luminously in the dark theater. For 6 days and 3 shows per day, the tumultuous response was repeated. On the last day of the run, John and Grace brought Guy, Barbara, and Chuck Killens. I watched the 3 teenagers from a curtain peephole. The comedians' routines were beyond their understanding. The singers' laments about unrequited love didn't catch their concern. The tap dancer made his complicated routine seem too easy. When I went on stage, the exoticism of seeing a familiar person in an unfamiliar setting did not hold their attention past the first few minutes. Before I finished my first song, I looked down and saw the 3 mumbling among themselves. When I finished, however, the children joined energetically with the audience on. Uhuru. Not so much singing the music as screaming the words. Guy's cracking lopsided voice pierced high above the ensemble sound. Shiftmen had been right and wrong. Some people sang better than I, but no one laughed me on the stage. After the Collenses and Guy left my dressing room, I prepared for the last show. I knew I would never again make an appearance as a singer. There was only one Apollo Theater, and no other place had the allure to melt my resolve. While the run had given me stature among my New York acquaintances, its real value was in the confidence it gave me. I had not won worldwide fame or gained stunning wealth, but I was leaving show business at the right time, stepping down from the pinnacle of the Apollo stage. And then I told you so imp had grinned behind my eyes all week long. Apollo audiences had been filling Frank Schiffman's ears with, oh yay, freedom. So he hadn't spoken to me since opening night. It was going to be a hallelujah time when he gave me my check. I finished the set and waited in the wings while the audience yelled for my return. I went back to the microphone and began. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This last piece needs audience participation. It is a song from Africa. It's called Uhuru, which means freedom. I'd like the people of this side of the theater to sing Uhuru, oh yay, freedom. The drums began to roll in a quick promise. And this side, damn, why don't you do your act, girl? If you can't sing, come back on Wednesday. That's amateur night. The man's voice came from the balcony, strident and piercing the dark theater like an unexpected light. My heart thumped, and I couldn't think of a thing to say. A few giggles from around the room encouraged him. Anyway. His voice was meaner and louder. Anyway, if you like Africa so much, why don't you go back there? The only thing I knew was I would never get on the stage. Hell's eternity would find me rooted in front of the mute microphone, my feet glued to the floor. The baby blue spotlight blinding me and holding me forever in that place. A grumble began in the balcony and was joined by sounds of displeasure on the main floor. I still couldn't move. Suddenly, a lemon-sour voice from the front row shouted, "Shut up there, you bastard. I paid money to come in here." Some yes and that's rights popped up in the theater. They angered my detractor. He shouted, "Go to hell, you old bitch. I paid for this shit too. Aw, cool it, goddamn it. Let the woman sing." A man's bass voice ordered from the rear, "Yeah." Another man spoke from the balcony and sounded dangerously near to the heckler. "Yeah, you don't like it. Get your ass down on the stage and do what you can do." That was it. Either there would be a bloody fight with cutting and shooting, or the heckler was going to come on the stage, take the microphone, and make me look even more foolish than I thought I was. I was surprised to realize that the drummers were still playing. The woman, my first offender, lifted her voice. "Freedom, freedom, freedom." She was in tempo, but the melody was wrong. More voices joined. "Freedom, freedom." The drums rolled on like an irate river. "Freedom, freedom." The singers in the audience increased. "Freedom." The entire main or seemed to have joined the drums. They had taken my side and taken the song away from me. The bass voice cut through the music. "Sing, girl, goddamn it, sing the goddamn song." I sang, "Oh, sawaba hum, oh, sawaba hum. Oh, yay, freedom." We didn't sing the song Alatunji had taught me, but we sang loudly and gloriously, as if the thing we sang about was already in our hands. My closing show reminded me of Mother's advice. Since you're black, you have to hope for the best. Be prepared for the worst and always know that anything can happen. When Schiffman gave me my check, we both grinned.
Katherine, Massey Book Club, Context of White Supremacy, 2025. We'll pick up very beginning of chapter 4. Context of White Supremacy. The number to dial, 605-313-5164. The code, 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Number again, 605-313-5164. The code, 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. I'm so glad that that portion, she included that in the text. Some of the hecklers, they have had Negro hecklers up at the Apollo for, what, a good century? Black people love to go up there and heckle and, "Oh, shut up. You can't even sing. Sit down. Boo, get off the stage." Love that. I told you that was the favorite night at the comedy club in Atlanta. I told you we loved that, to come and boo and heckle black people. But I especially wasn't just heckling. It was, whoa. You got so much African love. Why don't you take your hind parts back on over to the continent? Because I am a proud black American. You don't tell me about no Africa this and Africa that. I am American. That's, if she had tried that now, it might be the same thing. Progress. That's what they say, right? Progress. Pitiful. The email, untiljustice@gmail.com. Untiljustice@gmail.com. myriad.com. I do have to rewind to last week, though. Man. As I said at the beginning, and I guess 2 quick points that will get the folks who called in, read some emails, all that good stuff. One, I'm so disappointed. I thought we had secured the audiobook with Dr. Angelou narrating this book herself. I was so excited, so looking forward. Plus, it's way easier when I don't have to construct the audio. Even if, AI does it, it's still a lot more work than just, oh, it already exists. Whoopee. I get the audiobook for The Heart of a Woman with Dr. Angelou narrating. It's abridged. I could have cried. Like Christmas time, you go down, think you're going to get that PlayStation 5, you open it, and it's a sweater. Ugh. Or even better, you go and you crack it open and think, oh, we got a PlayStation 5. It's a PlayStation 2. Like, what? What? You... And just like with Dreams from My Father, why we don't do abridged audiobooks, the portions that they remove. For example, they have in the audiobook Billie Holiday coming to stay with Maya Angelou, but they remove that whole portion about the teachers. And they remove all of when she goes to New York and stays with John O'Killens and his wife. And it's like, man, I didn't appreciate talking about them. They just sat around and talked about white people as racist all the time, evil and mess over black people and all this. And what? They took all that out of the abridged version. That is exactly what they did with Dreams from My Father. They took out the portion where Obama, he was talking to a black female in Chicago during his community activist days, and it's a black female. She came in and she had blue contacts. He said, whoa, he was so surprised because she was always about, stay black, black and I'm proud. That was her all the time. And then she had these blue contacts. He said he was so surprised, and he's like, what am I saying? The power of white supremacy, it impacts us all. They took that out. The section, he goes to Kenya. He's not even American anyway, so he goes to Kenya, be back with his brothers and cousins and all that. Literally, his sister, they go out to eat at a Kenyan restaurant. Negro Kenyans are working at the establishment, serving the drinks and food and everything. He said a white couple came into the Kenyan restaurant, hooked them up, gave them the whole bar. They said, hey, I'm going to be president, and I'm Kenyan. I'm your black brother. Can I get a glass of water? Hey. They took all that out of the audiobook. That's why no abridged versions at the cows. But oh man, I was so, and the seller, the person, he had said, oh yes, unabridged, man, got the whole thing here. Nope, not even close. I could throw up. Same thing with the BBC rendition that we heard at the beginning. Now, they don't put everything in that BBC rendition either. I think even with that, they didn't include that discussion about all white people is racist in New York. And Maya even, dang, I was confused about this coming. I didn't understand. They edited all that out. That's one. Two, last week when reading this, for some reason, I think when the book started, it was at 1957. She was talking about different events. She was talking about the Little Rock Nine and everything. So I was at 57. Billie Holiday dies in 1959. So if Billie Holiday came and kicked it and was singing Strange Fruit and then died a few months later, this is 1959. I thought Guy was like 9 or something when all this happened. She said at the end, it's in the book, we heard the audio rendition this week, but she said, I'll remember her singing to a 13-year-old. I said what I said at the beginning, like, did you all have that was your understanding, like you were paying attention, A+ literary students that you are, scholars really, this is a 13-year-old. That was your thinking last week, 13-year-old, and, oh, okay, yeah, he's all that sensitive language, young ears. Was that your thing? Because I thought he was like 9 or something. I will say what I said, and particularly what I heard this week. You can take him to some old filth-flooring Cat Williams comedy club in Harlem and have him sitting there at 14. I'm going to say the same thing I said at the beginning. Get your sensitive ass out of that bed and go apologize to Billie Holiday. Don't say nothing. Don't say nothing. Shh. Just apologize. And the person who is wrong here is me, the parent. He's 13. Emmett Till was lynched at 14 in 1955. This is 1959. And this is a black male's response? What have I been doing? Oh, I've been out drinking. Said what I said at the beginning. Wow. 13, that would be okay. For 9, anything under, maybe, but 13, you're going to high school in the fall, presumably. What? Go apologize. I have been slacking as a parent. I need to get on my job. Exactly what Billie said. Like, what did I say? What did I say? You can go see Cat Williams. You should know all about, you've been reading the paper. You should know all about Emmett Till and this. You shouldn't be ignorant about lynching because you read the paper and the magazine and all that. So you know all this. You should know about lynchings. They're still happening in the 50s. Y'all would have to let me know, like, am I acting crazy? Because I don't have children. And I was not paying attention last week because I should have caught that last week. That, oh, whoa. He wasn't like 9 or something. Guy was 13 when this happened. Bad parenting. The problem is not Guy. Bad parenting. That's my indictment on that. And apparently we've had like generations of that. I ain't gonna talk to him. I ain't gonna talk to my child about no racism. No George Floyd. And then have the audacity to wonder, now why haven't we done a better job solving this problem? Parenting. Parenting. That's stay black. And you can let me know. Gus might be being ignorant. Had too much eggnog. 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Real talk. If you've not been reading the book, shut up. You want to impress Gus T? Get the book we are reading. Same thing I said before, especially if you gotta run your mouth on the book club. Get the book we're reading. They got Dr. Angelou at the library. No excuse. You don't have to spend $8,000. You can go to the library easily and get this book. Hard copy, e-copy, get it on your phone, all the above. WTF. Folks who dialed in, if you have commentary to share, let's hear it.
May I be heard?
Lauren joining us, 2025. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir. So the first thing I noticed in the segment was it says this is kind of a long section, but the black mother perceives destruction at every door, ruination at each window, and even she herself is not beyond her own suspicion. She questions whether she loves her children enough, or more terribly, does she love them too much? Do her looks cause her Do her looks cause embarrassment, or even more terrifying, is she so attractive her sons begin to desire her and her daughters begin to hate her? If she's unmarried, the challenges are increased. I'm going to skip a little bit. And then she says, teachers, doctors, sales clerks, librarians, policemen, welfare workers are white and exert control over her family's moods, conditions, and personality. Yet within the home, she must display a right to rule, which at any moment, by a knock at the door or a ring of the telephone, can be exposed as false. In the face of these contradictions, she must provide a blanket of stability which warms but does not suffocate. And she must tell her children the truth about the power of white power without suggesting that it cannot be challenged. Now, that whole part, when I read it, I was like, wow. And the first part that really, stuck out to me, that was super noticeable, to not use a metaphor, when she says, or more terribly, does she love them too much? And discounting the use of the word love, there's a legitimate concern that if white people know how much you care about something, they'll take it away. That's how I process that, right? And also the admission that you don't really have control, white people do. That's difficult for most non-white people that I talk to anyway to accept. And saying it out loud or writing it down seems to me to be even more difficult. So that whole part I thought was really important. The name of the play, One Life, One Love, John Henrik Clarke saying something about that. And, I found no life and very little love in the play from the opening of the act to its unfortunate end. It was kind of funny, but I see how it could have hurt her feelings. But he was being honest, so I appreciated that comment actually. I did notice she said, as long as I stayed black and their asses pointed toward the ground. I didn't even know asses pointed toward the ground, but that one confused me a little bit. Let me see. When they told the story about and the way they spelled it in the book, I mean, it seems like they were saying Negro, but it was spelled Negero, Negro. But the Negro who was saving up money so he could buy his freedom, he had $1,000. The slave master, tells him it'll be $600 to buy his freedom. And he's like, well, boss, freedom is a little too high right now. I'm going to wait till the price come down. We all laughed, but the laughter was acrid with embarrassment. Most of us had been Toms at different times of our lives. There had been occasions when the price of freedom was more than I wanted to pay. I guess, well, number one, the name calling, we're always calling each other Toms and Coons. But I was glad, the first thing she did was think of herself. I'm not exactly sure what the definition of a Tom is, but if a Tom is a person classified as black who does what white people want them to do at some time or another, then, that's not most of us. That's all of us. If we're really in a system of racism, white supremacy. People want to go put their name on that article or whatever. It said, John, stop them just a minute. I want to remind you all that if your name appears in the ad this afternoon, you can bet $10,000 and the sucker that by nightfall, it'll be in the FBI files. You'll be a suspect. Just remember that. And we are all suspect. I think that's how white people think of us. We don't have to get on any special list, although I get it. No one wants to go to the front of the line for mistreatment metaphor, but whatever. White people suspect us all. Let me see. I appreciate it when she asked him, what was the hardest literary form? And, he said short stories are so impossible they almost can't be written at all. And she said, put me down for reading in 2 months. I'll be reading a new short story. I kind of admired that because she chose the thing that she thought would be most difficult to do that. And a lot of people don't do that. They don't even want to do the easy things. And it says, I knew one white New York club owner who had been a loyal friend to me. Yikes. but with my recently acquired new level of black dignity, I refuse to go pleading to him for work. Man, that's absurd. I would have talked to that white man. They are in the best position to offer constructive assistance. And yeah, that's all I have for now. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Black brothers like brother hell.
Something about her commentary there reminded me that she did mention Lorraine Hansberry in this segment that I love. The late Sidney Poitier, who is mentioned in this book, Louis Gossett Jr. Black brother. That's the play she was talking about with Lorraine Hansberry and revealing to white audiences a dimension of Nick. Man, I could throw up like a billion different ways. Ugh. Cowbell on Lorraine Hansberry, and then Katherine Massey Book Club, and specifically the footnotes we read, and then had her as a guest on the program, which is rare for the cows. We rarely do it. Dr. Sylvia, man, do I have to get the footnotes specifically? So we read Packing Them In, an archaeology of environmental racism in Chicago, 1865 to 1954, right on the cusp of where we are in the book. Lorraine Hansberry, Chicago Proud, one of their favorites. She wrote Raisin in the Sun about a Negro family in Chicago with a privileged black male. Sean Diddy Combs plays the main character in Raisin in the Sun eventually, Walter Lee, where he absconds with all the money, jeopardizes the family, privileged. He wants to invest in a liquor store. And anyway, that's a different. Anyway, but we read Packing Them In way back. And she includes a footnote. I'll find it as we proceed, but it's in the rear of the text. She includes a footnote. This is where if I pulled up the e-copy, bam, I would have already had it. But since I have an actual hard copy of this text, I have to go old school and flip through. Anyway, but, and I asked her about this, Dr. Sylvia Hood Washington, when she came on the program. Lorraine Hansberry wrote that whole book where you would think that the nemesis is black dudes. The real life experience of Lorraine Hansberry and her black family before she married a white man. The racism, white supremacy was so bad. How bad was it, Gus T? They bought this house in a white neighborhood. Her parents' family had to take to packing heat, a pistol, not for them niggras on the south side of Chicago, for race soldiers. Same thing I said last week. Mahalia Jackson, white people will kill you. Move in and white people will kill you. That's not in Raisin in the Sun. That's nowhere. They have one kindly white man with glasses in Raisin in the Sun. That's not the real world at all. From a Negro author who married a white man. I shouldn't say Negro there because people will say, or some people may think I meant it pejoratively, and I say Negro all the time, and I did not, but ooh-wee, that would be sentence one. This is a black female author who married a white man. Minister Malcolm X used to harangue her about this publicly all the time, and she ended up coming back and finger wagging him in the face. She was upset about it. She'd have to come get Gus T too. You had a black female victim of white supremacy author who wrote a play about no-count Negro males, specifically, who was married to a white dude. She didn't say nothing about, wow, they were going to kill our family. We had to take the packing heat. That ain't in Raisin in the Sun. And I never heard any of that till I read Packing Them In, Dr. Sylvia Hood Washington, Katherine Massey Book Club. We'll see if that gets included, if any of that gets included as we proceed, since Lorraine Hansberry has already been mentioned. That section that was so powerful that Lauren read about the parenting, I thought, we'll read it again. So important. Let's see. Ooh, I have the e-copy, so I can't give you the page number. It reads, let me even scoot back up a little bit. The black mother perceives destruction at every corner, ruination at each window, and even she herself is not beyond her own suspicion. She questions whether she loves her children enough, or more terribly, does she love them too much? That word love. Do her looks cause embarrassment, or even more terrifying, is she so attractive her sons begin to desire her, Oedipus, and her daughters begin to hate her? If she is unmarried, the challenges are increased. Her singleness indicates she has rejected or has been rejected by her mate, yet she is raising children who will become mates. Beyond her door, all authority is in the hands of people who do not look or think or act like her and her children. White people. Teachers, doctors, sales clerks, librarians, policemen, welfare workers are white and exert control over her family's moods, conditions, personality. Yet within the home she must display a right to rule, which at any moment, by a knock at the door or ring of the telephone, can be exposed as false. I even have to pause right there. Now, we talked about this just last weekend, compensatory call-in. We talked about little Junior being hogtied in front of his family. They were out having a family meal. They said, hey, you made a threat. You might be next Columbine. Can't take any chances. Got to take little Junior. They said, no. And they said, shut up. Get you too. And they hogtied Junior and took him away. I think he was like 10, something like that. And I said then, there's many illustrations, but this was just days ago. You got to be honest. Hey, that phone call, that knock, they come snatch the drumstick out of your mouth, hogtie you, and take you to little people jail or grown people jail. You never know. Khalif Browder. Take you to jail. Greater confinement. And there's nothing I can do about it. If I lip too much, mom or dad, they'll take hogtie and take me too. You got to be honest about that. That's right. What I said. Can't be 13 and they don't know nothing about lynching? What? Emmett Till happened like last year? No, and we've been doing that. We've been lying. We've been shamming. That's attempted parents. And your child needs to know that, because that would further instill in them, whoa, I am in a super dangerous environment. Yes, you are. And dare might even have a slick child that we heard before that may ask you at some point, why, attempted mother, attempted father, why on earth did you have children under these circumstances? So they can see you stumbling and fumbling. They can see you which is what a lot of it would be, because a whole lot of us, we didn't really think of no answer before we produced these children. We didn't hear that in this book. We didn't think of nothing, so it would be a lot of stumbling and fumbling. Or, I don't know. Good question. I don't know. But you got to be honest. You can't sit up and lie about that and be faking it, attempted parent, and, be real about that, so you know when situations happen, hey, they can hog tie us all. Picking up where I left off at. Exposed as false in the face of these contradictions, she must provide a blanket of stability which warms but does not suffocate. Metaphor. And she must tell her children the truth about the power of white power. I don't dig redundancy in myself and others, like repetition. Man, I appreciated the repetition. That their word, she didn't pick privilege, P-O-W-E-R. Tell her children the truth about the power of white power without suggesting that it cannot be challenged. Back to that lynching, the whole everything about that at 13 years old, that to me suggests you have not told this 13-year-old child the truth about white power, if that's how he's responding to this song about strange fruit. And even the situation when she leaves him at home, oh my God, man, you want to talk about white power. You left a 13-year-old, even a 14-year-old black child at home while you are on the other side of the continent for who knows how long? And you didn't even leave him with a relative or a parent? That's two, I would say, that do not to me suggest you have told this child. Because the responsibility, what if white people had become aware of this? Any hoodles, very powerful. It reminded me of Richard Williams when he burst into tears when his when Venus was born, Black and White, the Way I See It, biography Kings 205, and we read that the same. That is crazy. I think we read that the same year because that book came out in two. That is crazy. That's why you all should not get to pick nothing, even though I think listeners did have some input on those two books. But I mean, Jesus Christ, are you serious? The Man in the High Castle, any of those autobiographies, you can run any of them. Any of them. I'd take the worst autobiography over any fiction. Best fiction. I don't know what that would be, but that's why I said The Invisible Man can't be top book on the cows. Cannot. That's a great fiction, but it is fiction. Black and White, Richard Williams, The Way I See It, spectacular. And he has a very similar passage about, man, it is right pitiful being a man. Really, you should be thinking, like, why did I have this child? Oh, my God, they're going to be called a nigger and everything. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. What am I doing? What are we going to do? That's the way it should be, really, for the duration of your time as a parent on the planet. Got to be planning, got to be thinking in advance, like way in advance, but we don't, we don't see that. Any hoodles, other folks who dialed in got the, I don't even have to say it again, Gus can talk all this, doesn't have children. Which would be an improvement over the half-A parenting that we have been doing. Genius Bay Area mommy who does have parents, she said, hey, we don't have to have the children. That would probably speed up this process of solving the problem. Facts. Sorry for being long-winded. Frederick Douglass, did you have commentary? Proceed.
Yes, sir. Greetings. Speaking of Guy, I got thinking about that. You mentioned about his age, and I did think he was 13 last week, based on the reading, and just the conversation tonight, referencing back earlier in the this week's reading. I was thinking, was Guy neglected? She leaves Guy to stay with her ex-boyfriend, who stays with him about a week and then runs off. He mentions that he was a man. So I guess if he's a man, then he doesn't have to have those kinds of things, but we know that's not true. And it seems like he's kind of had to grow up too fast, based on the kind of life that they're living, where he's being left alone or they're moving around a lot. And it just, while he thinks he's a man, there's a lack of understanding of being a man in the system of racism, white supremacy, how that's an impossibility for a non-white male. I was thinking back, too, about that section that both you and Miss Lauren read, and was wondering about the, when she says about the son beginning to desire her, in reference to the mother. I'm not a child psychologist, but I was thinking that that she might have even mentioned about maybe the son wanting to emulate the mother, becoming homosexual. And I guess another thing about Guy, I was wondering, it mentioned that while he was at summer camp at 7 years old, he slept with a butcher knife under his bed. And I don't know the details about that. I didn't know if he was scared of something at the summer camp. Maybe they were in the woods. Was he, did he go to summer camp with white people and he was afraid of them? That was kind of going through my head too, about Guy's, growing up. And then the last section about the Apollo, when she sang the Uhuru song, it kind of reminded me of Amazing Grace in the compensatory call-in this past week, where the one white woman sang that and calmed the crowd, and it seemed that this song indeed had that effect and quieted the heckler, and did get a few people singing, many people actually singing along with her that Uhuru song. And that's all I have.
Much obliged. Did you, the astute literary scholar, so you did have the correct thinking that, Guy was 13 when Billie Holiday is singing to him. The response, is that, what do you think as a 13-year-old, and that being his response that, oh man, what's a poplar tree, and why is it blood at the root, and oh my goodness, she's using all that language. I'm done. Like it, and him seemingly not connecting this with lynchings and such. Is that, I don't know. What do you think at 13 years old?
I'm not a parent, so I can't speak from that perspective. But I think that Guy seems rather precocious. He's knowledgeable, and that I would have thought that as a parent of a black child at that time, particularly with Emmett Till just happening a few years before, that those kind of conversations would have been had, that she would have had those kinds of conversations with him about the threats that exist for black males of any age. But, I mean, if you go back and look, I mean, she did go to the commune to escape from racism, white supremacy. And I recall, I don't know if it was this year or last year, there was a journalist from Kansas City who was on the program, and he spoke about the topic of children, and those discussions of racism, white supremacy came up. And he mentioned how he didn't really have those conversations with his son, despite the fact that he kind of had those, he covered that in the news. And I guess he felt that was not appropriate for his child at the time, who was, I think, approximately Guy's age. So I think it's, in a sense, it's a parent's discretion, but, I would err on being honest and open, so that they can be prepared with it. I mean, white parents are having these discussions with their children at 3. So I think we should have those discussions with children at 10. But that's all I have.
Good memory. That was journalist Toriano Porter, who was with us last year. He writes for the Kansas City Star, and that was exact same context, because we talked about, there had been a number of different incidents in the Kansas City area, still is the case at the time that we had him on the program, but specifically we were talking about Ralph Yarl, who was, I believe, 16 at the time, who was shot by a white man, race soldier. He went to the wrong house. Ralph, he's 16, child. He went to pick up his younger brother, and he went to the wrong house. And as opposed to just, you got the wrong address, get out of here, coon. He could have called him a name. Get off my lawn, coon. Beat it. The white man shot him, could have killed him. Thankfully, he survived. But he was 16, and this happened in the Kansas City area. And Mr. Porter had written about this father, and he has a child who is 50 or was 15 at the time. And so I was like, oh man, have you talked to him about that case? Because it's the same age. And he said no. And he gave his answers. You can go back here in the archive. But that, like I said, that is very common. I don't have children, But that's very common. I guess has been for generations. And I'd forgotten, that's right. They did stay at the commune with the cool revolutionary white people. Woo, man. Maybe you don't talk about Emmett Till. If these are revolutionary white people, though, why wouldn't they talk to him about Emmett Till? I mean, that's in the newspaper every day. That was Trayvon Martin, of the time. That was in all the papers and magazines and everything else. Why wouldn't his hippie white people be like, wow, man, did you see what happened to Emmett Till, man? Lame, man. Want a joint? That's what, they would, come on. Anywho, I don't have children. Star 61, other folks have commentary. Incidentally, he said about the camping incident, where she said guy slept with a butcher knife. She was thinking, what was he doing while he was by himself in California? Good point. But the autobiography series, this is book 4. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, which we read, is book 1. It might be in one of those other 2 books. What happened at camp? Why was he sleeping with a butcher knife? Was this a camp with white people? Maybe hippie revolutionary white people in California. She moved around a lot, so it could have been a camp in Hawaii. Who knows? But it might be in one of those earlier autobiographies. Maybe we can check and see. Let's see. Make sure I didn't miss any of the folks who dialed in. You have thoughts on the age, if, at 13, should you know, strange fruit? Even, I would think you've read about that song at this point. If you're, as you said, precocious, you read, you're highly literate, you're checking out the magazine articles. Wow. Emmett Till, you didn't see him at all? You didn't talk with any of your hippie white dudes from Emmett Till? Like, I don't know. Let's see. Folks who wrote in. Email number 1. Hi, Gus. I'm enjoying the new book, even though we've just started reading it, and I'll ponder why it's not as popular as her other works. The metrics would bear that out. As we progress, a few comments on last week's reading. Number 1, I understood why Guy was upset with his mother for not stopping Billie Holiday swearing and singing inappropriate songs to him. You think this song is inappropriate for a 13-year-old? Maybe she can tell us. She can, person who wrote this in. Question, is this inappropriate? Or what? And if it is, why is this song? What exactly is inappropriate about this song for a 13-year-old black child? I can't imagine any circumstance where I'd do the same and suspect Maya Angelou would have stepped in if the person wasn't famous. Right to be upset. I'm not suggesting she was shallow, but perhaps slightly intimidated and in awe. 2, she painted a great illustration of the Voltron effect when Guy was suspended from school. Metaphor. I noted the teachers were female and they instigated his suspension, and I'm glad Maya Angelou wasn't fooled by the lie about Guy's grade improving, so he was being moved to a higher performing school. Refined racism at its best. I think Maya Angelou took surprising risks with her son, leaving him with a man that she was ending a relationship with. I recall her being sexually abused by the lodger at her grandparents' home as a child, correct, the Caged Bird sings, but I suspect there was limited understanding at that time of the risks to young boys. Yeah. 4, I think the crisp white woman comment would have made sense at that time because white people were less refined about their racism at that time, so would be overtly hostile when speaking to black people. Today, racists will smile and speak to you as if you are indeed friends, in quotes. 5, I've never heard the phrase stay black until... That is wild because it's so ubiquitous, I think was how it was phrased. I've never heard the phrase stay black and die. I've heard stay black, but don't have a definition. I've heard both. Just stay black And then I've heard all I have to do is stay black and die. And it's not even uplifting, right? It's not stay black and prosper. Stay black and live long. Stay black and die. Like, everybody dies. Like, even like we can, let's just leave that part of it all. We can just stay black. You can ponder if that even needs to be in 2025. Can that be retired? Can we let that, or at least put a good definition on it? And like I said, I would be so glad, because I would stop doing anything on that list immediately. But either we should stop saying that and discourage it from being said ever again, or at least like immediately we're not doing anything else. Like, I wouldn't care if we're having sexual intercourse, like no matter the activity, stay black, pause. What does that mean exactly? Give it to me so I can write it down. Or we let that one go, maybe. Shouldn't be too much vested in that phrase, maybe. Langston Hughes wrote a lot of stuff. If that's true, if we got it from him, he wrote lots. He wrote The Ways of White Folks. He wrote lots of stuff that we can appreciate beyond that little tacky phrasing. Let's see. A few of my notes. We'll get to some of the other emails and callers. Yeah, that really stands out as me. Like, even I highlighted, she said the flash of panic in his eyes was exchanged for scorn whenever I brought a new man into our lives. Like, WTH, man. Like, when do you make time to explain the power of white power? Like, what? It just doesn't seem like this is a major priority. Like, even she said stability. She said sometimes she would get good money and they would go stay at lavish joints, and then other times, she wouldn't have as much money and they would be at rooming houses and she's sneaking in a hot plate to make food. Like, that's not stability. Unless I've been misinformed. Like, you would have to stand with some stranger and or by yourself, and it seemed like that happened repeatedly, where he would just be left, wherever. That's not stability either. I don't have children. Let's see. When he said I'm a man, that's another one where you do not understand white power. I mean, wow. Like, I have not done a good job, because that's not going to fly. White people come by, I'm a man, I can take care of myself. Really? Hog time. Like, whew, let's see. We already got paragraph comes next. Who's in charge of everything in the world? Let's see. She goes to the Writers Guild. I do even think this is important. When she goes to the Writers Guild and they give constructive feedback, they have these sorts of groups now. Where you can go if you're writing something, nonfiction, autobiography, history, fiction, short story, poetry, whatever. You can go and they'll do exactly this, like bring food, critique your work politely, make little notes and things, and help you through the progress. Like, you can bring multiple drafts and they can see how it's growing and all that good stuff. You can check online if you're interested in your area, to even if you have not written anything, to get you motivated to get writing. Those groups do exist. I do think there's something to be said for constructive criticism. This is very different. It seems like you sign up, you voluntarily attend these groups and submit material that you hope they'll critique. It didn't seem like they called her any names, you Tom Coon and and even after they gave the criticism, hey, encouraged her. You do have some talent. Get to it, That is grand, as opposed to where it is unsolicited. If Dr. Angelou had just been out on the corner, sitting at the park or what have you, and someone just comes up voluntarily, I read your crap and it stinks and you should quit. Like, dang, there is a lot of that amongst non-white people, victims of white supremacy, where to start, it is unsolicited. We don't even have to get to whether or not it's constructive. They didn't even request any sort of, critique, what have you. You can at least ask. Like it might be, nah, I'm cool, I got it. Oh, okay, no problem. Save some of my time then. Mark that off my list of things to do. Much less, if I am going to give some feedback, maybe I'll make sure I'm not name calling. Just a, few suggestions. I can be courteous. And again, making sure that this is solicited, requested, constructive criticism. That's what she got lots of here, though. Let's see. And some encouragement, like, hey, that's even bonus. Bonus. Let's see. I hadn't heard the as long as I stay black and their butts point downward. I hadn't heard that one before either. Got imagination, I guess. And it is, I guess, we got some curious spellings of Niggaro. It's in there with an extra E. And then we got Castro is speaking Niggerese. Lots of different derivatives, whatever that is. I'd never heard that one. Niggerese. I'd never heard that one before. But Castro did come to New York State, and he did spend time in Harlem specifically. They have photos of him with Minister Malcolm X together in Harlem talking about Patrice Lumumba in Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat. That is one of the many significant moments in the film. Again, this book is in said movie. Let's see. They call them snooty bastards. Let's see. And I think many people, particularly about things that they've wrote that are personal to them, they are sensitive about feedback. That's why I say you should see if it's solicited. Is this even wanted? So they'll be receptive to what you have to say, and then not publicly. Now again, she volunteered to be a part of this public group critique. That is very different, like I said, from waiting till she's up at the Apollo and I'm like, hey man, we are not Africans, and why don't that's kind of we do a lot of that, victims. We do a lot of that. Let's see. She said Grace chuckled and bit into her cigarette holder. They did encourage a lot of cigarette smoking, even among females at this time. You had a lot of black female smokers even at this time. Got to get lots and lots of lung cancer. Let's see. I think Lauren mentioned the portion about the Tom and us, the pronoun. She didn't say most of these black people had been Tom. She didn't say that. She said most of us had been Toms. And she even personalized. She didn't even say us or them. She said the price for freedom was more than I wanted to pay, but she didn't elaborate. But that also is kind of rare, where it's not just pointed out that these are the Coons and Toms. And no. Coon number one, Tom number one, right here. See that mirror? That Tom number one right there. I've been Tomming for a while. That is the truth of the matter for all of us. Me, all of us. Let's see. The Fair Play for Cuba organization. Gee, I could have fell out, man. Lee Harvey Oswald, if that name means anything to you, affiliated with the Fair Play for Cuba organization. Wacky. I did think it was important when John Henrik Clarke, the great grandcestor, when he gave the, or not that, before John Henrik Clarke, when they got the reminder, or I guess it was, he gave two reminders. So he gives the initial reminder, if you put your name on the list, you'll be in the FBI files. Now that is important because that is true. And even beyond, just being at a meeting like this, that might be enough to get your name on an FBI list. That book Dr. Welsing said you can't talk about racism if you haven't read Racial Matters, the FBI's secret file on Black America, 1960 to 1972. That's exactly what that book talks about. And even that book says the same thing, almost verbatim. We had the author as a guest on the Cows 3 different times, twice, to talk about that book, and I hate repetition. But he said first time around, 2009, if you are Nigra in this part of the world, you are suspect because we treat black people like garbage. So we know they might be upset about that. Got to keep an eye on them. He explained it in great detail, but that's the exact metaphor that he used. Garbage. And that's why we got a surveillance, tap the phones, all that, informants, snitches, and on and on and on. He was talking about in the 1920s, mind you, so over 100 years. And then he gave the, hey, if you're here, you're suspect, so we continue. But for sure, you put your name on a list like that, ooh, for sure, as I think Lauren said, now you can move to the front of the line for surveillance and abuse. That might be important or not. She said, I would be trying to overcome was black people's honorable tradition. I have never heard that said before. I've just never heard that said before, that's black people's honorable tradition is trying to overcome what exactly? Like racism? I've just never heard that said, like black culture is black people trying to overcome racism. Like what? Who said? Again, now, if they did say that, right on, sign up, but they don't say that. They say like cornrows, sweet potato pie, the dozens, Sanford and Son. That's what they say generally for black culture and black tradition. Abby Lincoln and Max Roach are all in soundtrack to a coup d'etat repeatedly. Let's see. Yeah, Lorraine Hansberry, Dizzy Gillespie is also in soundtrack to coup d'etat, importantly even, repeatedly. Let's see. We heard about Mr. Michaud, his book show, which prided itself on being able to get a copy of any book written by a black person since 1900. Wow, I do not think that would be of any value now. Like, read, trying to watch Netflix. You got to get a documentary. She mentioned that the clever appliance stores, they would keep the TV on the UN. Global. So I just mentioned Fidel Castro. Minister Malcolm is going to the continent, as is Dr. Maya Angelou. Global system of white supremacy racism. And you had a lot of non-white people who were thinking about racism as a global system. That also bothers a lot of the black people who were talking about racism as a global problem. They were killed. But watching the UN, paying attention to global events. I will leave it there. Let's see. Audio segment number 2. If we didn't get to hear from you, write a note. We should have ample time. Dr. Maya Angelou's The Heart of a Woman, not narrated by Dr. Angelou, unfortunately.
Chapter 4. I thought Godfrey Cambridge was one of the prettiest men I had ever seen. His features had the immutability of a Benin mask, and his white teeth were like flags of truce. His skin was the color of rich black dirt along the Arkansas River. He was tall and big and spoke English with the staccato accent of a New York-born descendant of West Indian parents. He was definitely the one. He was introduced to me at a Greenwich Village party. He said that he was an unemployed actor, and because I mistook his curiosity for romantic interest, I pursued. We exchanged phone numbers, and when I called and invited him to dinner, he accepted. Guy and Godfrey became a team in the first 10 minutes. Guy enjoyed Godfrey's funny stories about his job as a taxi driver and his adventures auditioning for white musicals. We ate a 4-course meal. I always used my cooking to enhance my sex appeal and laughed a lot. After Guy went to bed, Godfrey and I sat in the living room listening to records and drinking cognac-laced coffee. To my disappointment, the jokes continued. Godfrey talked about crazy passengers, egotistic actors, and tyrannical directors, and each story led to a punchline which begged for laughter. The stories became more forced and time moved haltingly. Despite my availability, my cooking, and my willingness, together we ignited no passionate fires. When I let him out of the house, he gave me a brother's kiss and I scratched him off my list as a possibility. The Harlem church was full, with standees in the rear. A few white people sat in the middle rows, stiffly, not moving, not turning to look at the black people who buzzed like hive bees. Godfrey and I had come to hear Rev. Martin Luther King, JRB. He had just been released from jail and was in New York to raise money for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and to make Northerners aware of the fight being waged in Southern states. 5 black men marched in single onto the rostrum, their solemnity a perfect foil for the raucous welcome of the audience. The host minister introduced Wyatt Walker, a Baptist preacher whom I thought too handsome for virtue and too young for wisdom. He spoke, in a purely Baptist voice, of Alabama and the righteous struggle for justice. Fred Shuttlesworth, another attractive minister, was introduced. I wondered if the Skulk had a policy of keeping the ugly preachers at home and sending only the good-looking ones to the north. Shuttlesworth leaned his thin body over the podium, jutting a Black Hawk-like face at the audience. His words were sharp and his voice accusatory. He became a hatchet of a man, chopping away at our geographic security. What were we doing in New York City while black children were being set upon by dogs, black women were raped, and black men maimed and killed? Did we think New York City could escape the righteous wrath of God? This was our chance to join the Holy Crusade, pick up the gauntlet down and hate, carry it through the bloody battleground to the region of peace and justice and equality for all. The audience stood up and the Reverend Shuttlesworth sat down. Ralph Abernathy was introduced next. He moved slowly and quietly toward the podium. He stood a few seconds, looking down at his hands, which rested on top of the desk. His speaking voice was a surprise and his delivery a shock. He didn't have the ray of Walker or the anger of Shuttlesworth. His message was clear and quick, and in an unnerving way, the most powerful. The South was in a phase of change, and everyone must pay for change because everyone will benefit from change. As Christians, we all should be ready for change because if we think about it, Jesus was the greatest changer in history. He changed the idea of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. He ran the moneylenders from the temple because they were cheating the people and taught forgiveness even of one's enemies. Reverend Abernathy reminded the audience that only with God could we develop the courage to change the unchangeable. When he moved ponderously, slowly to his seat, there was a long moment when the audience sat still, because his words had not been coded. With passion or fashion in eloquent prose, they took longer to swallow. The host minister rose again, and all rustling stopped. The room held its breath. The preacher told us what we already knew about Martin Luther King, the dangers he had experienced and the triumphs he had won. The listeners didn't move. There was a yawping expectancy under the stillness. He was here, our own man, black, intelligent, and fearless. He was going to be born to us in a moment. He would stand up behind the pulpit, full grown, and justify the years of sacrifice and the days of humiliation. He was the best we had, the brightest and most beautiful. Maybe today would be the day we would end ourselves free. The introduction was over and Martin Luther King, JRB, rose. The audience collectively lost its composure. Pews scraped against the floor as people stood, rearing back, pushing, leaning forward, shouting, "Yes, Lord. Come on, Dr. King. Just come on." A stout, short woman in red, standing next to me, grabbed me around the waist and squeezed. She looked at me as if we were old friends and whispered, "If I never drew another breath, I could die happy." She released me and caught the arm of a man on her right, pulling the arm to her breast, cradling it and whispering, "It's all right now. He's right here and it's all right." Martin Luther King, JRB, stood on the dais away from the podium, allowing the audience full view of his body. He looked at the audience, smiling, accepting the adulation, but strangely apart from it. After a minute, he walked to a position behind the podium and raised both hands. It was at once a surrendering and a quelling gesture. The church became quiet, but the people remained standing. They were trying to ell their eyes with the sight of the man. He smiled warmly and lowered his arms. The audience sat immediately as if they had been attached by invisible strings to the ends of his fingers. He began to speak in a rich, sonorous voice. He brought greetings from our brothers and sisters in Atlanta and in Montgomery, in Charlotte and Raleigh, Jackson and Jacksonville. A lot of you, he reminded us, are from the South and still have ties to the land. Somewhere there was an old grandmother holding on, a few uncles, some cousins and friends. He said the South we might remember is gone. There was a new South, a more violent and ugly South, a country where our white brothers and sisters were terrified of change, inevitable change. They would rather scratch up the land with bloody fingers and take their most precious document, the Declaration of Independence, and throw it in the deepest ocean, bury it under the highest mountain, or burn it in the most flagrant blaze, than admit justice into a seat at the welcome table and fair play room in a vacant inn. Godfrey and I slid close until our shoulders and thighs were touching. I glanced at him and saw tears glistening on his dark face. Rev. King continued, chanting, singing his prophetic litany. We were one people, indivisible in the sight of God, responsible to each other and for each other. We, the black people, the most displaced, the poorest, the most maligned and scourged, we had the glorious task of reclaiming the soul and saving the honor of the country. We, the most hated, must take hate into our hands and by the miracle of love turn loathing into love. We, the most feared and apprehensive, must take fear and by love change it into hope. We, who die daily in large and small ways, must take the demon death and turn it into life. His head was thrown back and his words rolled out with the rumbling of thunder. We had to pray without ceasing and work without tiring. We had to know evil will not forever stay on the throne. That right, dashed to the ground, will rise again and again. When he finished washing us with his words, caressing our scarred bodies with his optimism, he led us in singing. Oh, freedom! Strangers embraced tightly. Some men and women wept openly, choking on sobs. Others laughed at the waves of spirit and the delicious tide of emotion. Godfrey and I walked from Harlem to the Hudson River in near silence. From time to time, he would throw his arm around my shoulder, or I would take his hand and squeeze it. We were confirming. We sat on a bench overlooking the sluggish water. So what's next? What are we going to do about it? Godfrey beat me to the question, and I had no answer. We got to do something. Reverend King needs money. You know damn well we're not going down to hang him high and let some cracker sherry sap up on our heads. And we're not going to no Southern jail. So what are we going to do? He was asking the wind, the dark river, and himself. I answered, we could get some actors and singers and dancers together. Years before, Hollywood musicals had shown how young talented unknowns put on gloriously successful shows with no money, and although I was over 30 years old, I still believed in the youthful fantasy. Godfrey said, we can put on a show, maybe run it through the summer. When he grinned at our future success, he showed that he was as youthful and fanciful as I. Godfrey had a friend, Hugh Hurd, an actor who knew everybody and had fabulous organizational skills. He would talk to Hugh. There were a lot of singers from Porgy and Bess who hadn't worked since the opera folded, and I agreed to talk to them. It occurred to us that we should get permission from the people at the Skulk in order to raise money in their name. Godfrey said since I was the Christian, I ought to be the one to make the contact. Within 1 hour, our plans were laid. I would write a show, Godfrey would do a funny skit, and he and I would produce it. Hugh Hurd, if he agreed, would direct it. We would pay the performers and ourselves union scale, and all other monies would go to the SCLC. We had no idea where the show would be held, who would perform, how much we would charge, or even whether the religious organization would welcome our intentions. There was a lot to do, and we had to get started. The SCLC offices were on 125th Street and 8th Avenue in the center of Harlem. I had telephoned and made an appointment to speak to Bayard Rustin. When I walked up the dusty stairs to the second floor, I rehearsed the speech I had tried out on John Killens. Mr. Rustin, I want to say first that not only do I and my colleague Godfrey Cambridge appreciate and laud the activities of Reverend Martin Luther King and the SCLC, we admire your own work in the field of race relations and human rights. John had told me that Bayard Rustin had led protest marches in the United States during the 40s, worked to better the condition of the untouchables in India, and was a member of the War Resisters League. We want to show our appreciation and support by putting on a show here in New York, a show which will highlight the meaning of the struggle and, at the same time, raise money for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He couldn't possibly refuse the offer. At the head of the stairs, a receptionist, sitting behind a warped wooden desk, told me that Mr. Rustin had been called away on an emergency mission, but Stanley Levison would see me. I was stopped. Could I still use my speech? Levison sounded Jewish, but then John Levy and Billie Eckstein were black men with Jewish names. The woman spoke on the telephone and then pointed to a door. Mr. Levison will see you now. He was short, stockily built, well-dressed and white. I had come to talk to a black man about how I and Godfrey, also black, could help ourselves and other black people. What was there to say to a white man? Stan Levison waited, his square face blank, his eyes direct, unapologetic. I began. I am a singer. That is, I was a singer, now I'm a writer. I want to be a writer. My poise was gone and I hated myself. How could I dream of confronting an entire country of bigots when facing a lone white man threw me into confusion? Yes, and how can the SCLC help you? He saw my indecision. In desperation, I leaped into my prepared speech. I want to say first that not only do I and my colleague Godfrey Cambridge, the comedian Cambridge. Yes, I've heard him. Levi's son leaned back in his chair. Appreciate and support. I cut out the part about Bayard Rustin and finished with, and raise money for the SCLC. Levison moved forward. Where will the play be shown? Damn it, caught again. If only Bayard Rustin had been in the office, I could have counted on a few minutes during which he would thank me for realizing who he was and appreciating what he had done. We don't have a theater yet, but we will have one. You can bet your life we will get one. Insecurity was making me angry. Let me call in someone. He's a writer and might be able to help you. He picked up the telephone. Ask Jack Murray to step into the office, please. He hung up the phone and asked, with only a little interest, and what do you know about the SCLC? I was at church yesterday. I heard Dr. King. Oh, yes. That was a great meeting. Unfortunately, we didn't take in the money we expected. The door opened, and a little man wearing brown slacks and an open shirt and sports jacket walked in a hurry. Jack Murray had sounded black, but he was as white as Stanley Levison. Yeah, Stanley. What is it? Levison stood and, waving his arm in my direction, said, This is Miss Angelou, Maya Angelou. She had an appointment with Bayard, but he was called away. She's got an idea. Maya, this is Jack. He also works with the SCLC. I stood and offered my hand to Murray and watched the little boy smile cross his middle-aged face. Glad to know you, Miss Angelou. What's your idea? I explained that we wanted to stage a play, a kind of review, using whatever good talent available, and that we planned to develop the show on the theme of liberation. Stanley Levison laughed for the first time. I was right to call in Jack. Do you know anything about pins and needles? I didn't, so he told me that Jack Murray had been involved with pins and needles in the 30s and it became a Broadway show, but based on the problems of the working class. Do you have a theater? Again, I had to confess that my colleague and I, hadn't got that far. How large is the cast? How long do you need for rehearsal? His tone was friendly, but if I admitted that so far our plans had only gone as far as an emotional conversation on the banks of the Hudson, the two white men would think me childish. I said, we have a number of actors and on-call singers. My friend is out making contacts. I blathered on about the need to keep the cast good, but small, so that there would be a substantial amount of money left over for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. When Jack Murray got a chance to speak, he repeated, how long will you need for rehearsal? I spoke the first thought that offered itself to me. 2 weeks. Stanley coughed. That's a very short rehearsal period, isn't it? I looked at him and he seemed as solid as a bank building. Maybe he was right. 2 weeks might not be enough time, but my ego was at stake. We're going to use black entertainers. Professional people. It was my intention to stop the irritating interrogation and put the two white men back in the white race where they belonged. Stanley cleared his throat and chuckled. Oh, Miss Angelou, you're surely not trying to tell us that Negro entertainers don't need the same time as white entertainers because they are just naturally endowed with talent. That was exactly what I had said and exactly what I meant. But it sounded wrong coming out of the mouth of a white man. Arrogance prevented me from retraction and was about to lead me into a corner from which there was no escape. Black entertainers have had to be 10 times better than anyone else, historically. Jack Murray's voice floated softly into my tirade. Miss Angelou, I assure you, you don't have to convert the converted. Historically, the exploited, the enslaved, the minority has had to strive harder and be more qualified just in order to be considered in the running. Stanley and I understand that. That's why we are full-time volunteers at SCLC, because we understand. I was grateful that his words were apt and his voice soothing. In the next 18 months, I was to find myself frequently in debt to Jack Murray for throwing lifelines to me as I floundered in seas of confusion or frustration. Do you know the Village Gate? Every performer in the United States had heard of the Greenwich Village nightclub where Lenny Bruce, Nina Simone, and Odetta might be found playing on the same night. Murray said, Art DeLugo owns it and he's an okay guy. He usually has a few unbooked days during the summer. After your plans are a little further along, maybe we could have a little meeting with Art. How soon do you expect to be ready? All we needed was permission from your organization. We'll be ready in a few days. When can I see Mr. Rustin? There was something wrong with asking white men for permission to work for my own cause. Levison looked at me and without answering, picked up the telephone. Has Mr. Rustin come in? Good. Let me speak to him. I waited while he continued. Bayard, I've got a young woman in here who is going to put on a play to raise money for the organization. Right. She had an appointment. She's coming in to see you now. I shook hands with both men and walked out of the office. Stanley Levison didn't say wants to put on a play, but is going to put on a play. An oblique permission, admittedly, but it was what I came for. Bayard Rustin stood, shook my hand, and welcomed me. Miss Angelou? Sorry I wasn't here when you arrived. Stanley says you have a play. Have a seat. Care for coffee? Have you got money for your production? Cash? A theater? What is the play's message? While we at SCLC are grateful for all efforts, understandably what the play says or doesn't say can be of more importance than the money it raises. You understand that? Words stepped out of his mouth sharply, fast, clipped in the accent of a British Army sergeant. He was tall, lean, dark brown, and good-looking. I explained again, revealing a little more to Bayard than I had to Stanley or Jack. Neither Godfrey nor I had any experience at producing a show, but we knew people, and if the SCLC gave us the go-ahead, that's exactly what we would do. I added that Jack Murray had offered to intercede with Art DeLugo, and if that worked, we would use the Village Gate as a theater. Bayard nodded and told me he'd have to see the script first, and if it was acceptable, the SCLC would approve and even lend us its mailing list. The telephone rang before I could express my excited thanks. After speaking briefly into the receiver, he stood and offered his hand to me. Miss Angelou, an important call from Atlanta. Please excuse me. Get the script into me as soon as possible. Thank you and good luck. He was sitting back down even as we shook hands, his attention directed to the telephone. I was out on the street, burning to talk to Godfrey. We had permission, maybe we had a theater, we had the desire and the talent. Now all we needed was a cast, musicians, and a script. I stopped on the corner of 125th Street. Hell, how did one write a script? Godfrey brought Hugh to a diner on Broadway where we had scheduled our meeting. Hugh substantiated Godfrey's confidence. He acted efficient. His skin was the color of an unbroken coconut, and he looked just about as hard to crack. His attitude was in contradiction to his youth, but Godfrey later explained to me that Hugh's parents, West Indians, also owned liquor stores, and Hugh had grown up coping with stock, greedy salesmen, shifty employees, and drunken customers. Naturally, he supported Martin Luther King, any black man who didn't deserve to be thrown in an open ditch and covered with shit. Of course, he would direct the show, but he needed absolute autonomy. Certainly, he would work for scale, and if things went well, he might contribute his salary to the SCLC, and where the hell was the script? After a week, our plans were gelling. Godfrey had lined up actors. I telephoned singers and dancers, Hugh arranged with musicians, but we still had no script. I had sat late into the night trying to pick plots out of the air. We needed a story which had the complexity of Hamlet and the pertinence of A Raisin in the Sun. Facile ideas came swiftly and had to be discarded without regret. My characters had the predictability of a beat cowboy movie and the navette of a Sunday school play. Godfrey, Hugh, and I met Jack Murray down at the Village Gate. Art DeLugo, reminding me of a tamed California bear, said we could use the theater on Sundays, Monday, and Tuesday nights. We had to pay the lighting technician unless we furnished our own, but DeLugo would contribute the room free. By the way, what was the play about, and could he see the script? Guy had found a part-time job in a bakery nearby, and Dawn's found him showering and dressing, and me sitting at a typewriter, constructing plot after unacceptable plot and characters so unreal they bored even me. One morning, Guy stood looking over my shoulder at the blank page in the typewriter. Mom, you know, you might be trying too hard. I turned quickly and blurted, this is important. It's for Martin L. King, for the SCLC, for black people everywhere. I can't possibly try too hard. He stepped back, hurt by my brusqueness. Well, I'm just reminding you of something you say all the time. If it don't fit, don't force it. Bye, I'm going to work. I hadn't spanked him since he was 7 years old. Now that he was a tall 15-year-old, the temptation to slap the water out of him was almost irresistible. John Killens was expectedly sympathetic and unfortunately unhelpful. You've got a theater and no cash, a cause and no play. Yep, your work is cut out for you. Good luck. Keep trying. Time and need had me in their clutches. Entertainers who had been contacted were calling Hugh or Godfrey every day. They in turn telephoned me asking when we could start auditions. I wasn't working, so at 15 Guy was the only breadwinner. His money provided food, and John and Grace lent me money for rent so that I didn't have to touch my small savings account. I needed the American Guild of Variety Artists scale I would receive once the play was on. Desperation had triumphed the day Godfrey stopped by my house. He had dropped off a fare in the next block and decided to ring my bell and see if I was in. When I opened the door and saw his face, I started crying. He stepped into the foyer and took me in his arms. I've had women scream when they saw me, and some bras laugh when I come up on them all of a sudden, but I never had anybody break down and start crying. He was patting my shoulder. You're a first, baby. I appreciate what you're doing. You're a first. Cry on. Cry your heart out. I'm enjoying this. I had to laugh. No, keep on crying. I'll write you down in my diary. I've heard of women who cry when a man leaves, but you cry when. Laughter defeated my tears. I led him into the living room and went to the kitchen for coffee. I washed my face and composed myself. The tears had been as much a surprise to me as they were to Godfrey. Godfrey, I can't write the play. I don't even know where to start. Well, hell, you start with Act I, Scene I, same way Shakespeare started. My throat hurt and tears began to well up behind my eyes. I can't write the damn thing. I've agreed to do something I can't do. Well, don't do it then. Nobody's going to die if you don't write the damn play. Fact is, it might be better if you didn't write a word. There's a lot of people who would be grateful not to have to sit through one more bad play. Personally, I wish a lot of playwrights would have said just what you said. I can't write the damn thing. He laughed at himself. But what can we do? The SCLC is waiting. Art DeLugo is waiting. Hugh and the entertainers are ready. And I'm the bottleneck. He drank the coffee and thought for a minute. We'll let the entertainers do their acts. Most of them have been out of work so long, they'll jump quicker than a country girl at a hoedown. You don't have to write a play. If you've got a skit or two, you can give it to them. We'll do a cabaret kind of thing. That's all. When I realized that Godfrey's idea was workable, the burden of tension left my body, and for the first time in weeks, I relaxed and my brain started to function. We could ask them for songs and dances and turns particularly black. The old Apollo routines. Something like Red Fox and Slappy White. You know, I'm Fox and the other one says, I'm white. Then Fox answers, you're either a fool or you're colorblind. The ideas were springing. There was no reason to worry. We would have a show. We would raise money. The reputation I didn't even have was not going to be ruined. Godfrey looked at his watch. Gotta go. Some fool without a dime in his pocket is waiting to get me to take him to the Bronx. He got up. This stop was okay. I helped a damsel in distress. Maybe my next fare will pay me in Canadian dimes. We stood at the door and I looked at the rusted and dented taxi illegally parked in front of my house. You could have got a ticket. He said, that would have been the only thing given to me today. You're okay now? We've got a show. A cabaret. He had the taxi door open. I shouted, we'll call it Cabaret for Freedom, okay? Yeah, that sounds serious. Entertaining and serious. Just what we ought to be. See you. Straight out of the movies. We were the talented unknowns who, with only our good hearts and those of our friends, would create a show which professional producers would envy. Our success would change the hearts of the narrow-minded and make us famous. We would liberate the race from bondage, or maybe we would just go on and save the entire world. At dress rehearsal, Guy and Chuck sat with me in the shadows of the village gate. Singers and dancers moved across the stage, making themselves familiar with the boards and the microphone. Godfrey stood under the lights near the stage, and Hugh Hurd sat in the rear, clothed in the importance of being the director. J. Flash Riley started his comedy routine. His face and body jumped and skittered, and his eyes opened and shut in rhythm. His lines were funny and unexpected, so the boys beside me howled in appreciation. Later, a female singer, Leontine Watts, sang a sultry, moaning song for a man loved and lost, and I identified with her song. Although I had not really loved and lost, I was lonely and even missed the pedestrian love affair I left in Los Angeles. Godfrey and I were being molded into a friendship which had no room for romance. John Killens was concretely married. John Clark had another interest and was, in any case, too hard for my liking. Sylvester Leeks had hugged me often, but never asked for my phone number. If I had the chance, I could moan some salty songs. I had been living with empty arms and rocks in my bed. I was only saved from utter abstinence by accidentally running into a musician who remembered me from my touring days. He lived on the Upper West Side, and once a week, I would visit his studio apartment. Because of the late hours of his job, he slept until after 2. He told me he preferred me to catch him as he was waking. It kept him from having to make up the sofa twice and take 2 showers in the same day. I always left satisfied, so I was glad to oblige. We were not only not in love and just slightly in like, our weekly ferocious rendezvous stopped just short of doing each other bodily harm.
Stay black. Stay black. Stay black. Katherine Massey Book Club. Context of White Supremacy. Neely Fuller Jr. has talked about that explicitly, as has Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. You gonna do some attempted parenting of a black child? All those days are done. I'm gonna hop on the app, see if I can find somebody, and yum, and all that. All those days are done. Your number one priority is those children. Period. Dating and all that, you get to that later. And I mean, really, at this point, if he's 13, 14, hey, you can let them get 19, 20, get to school, move out. Then we can get to that. But I mean, dang, you got 13, 14-year-olds that are being left for weeks at a time and all this. Like, man, come on. Come on. Not exemplary parenting. Stay black. Number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. We got Red Fox in there. Almost sound like Red Fox's Negro culture, which I have heard before. Then it was, I'm going to give the full sentence. We needed a story which had the complexity of Hamlet and the pertinence of A Raisin in the Sun. Cowbell. Pertinence. Relevant or applicable to a particular matter. A Raisin in the Sun, about a shiftless, no-count black dude who almost ruins the entire family attempted. Gives the money away to another shiftless, no-count black dude. Incidentally, they got all this money via insurance when the black patriarch of the family dies. That's how they got this money, which was promptly stolen by another shiftless black dude, and then they move off to a white neighborhood with no money, and the mom has to come out of retirement, the grandmother has to come out of retirement and work, and maybe even little Junior have to quit school and get a job so they can afford this house in a white neighborhood where in real life white people were ready to kill them. The end. Pertinence. Pertinence. Got to be, Joe. And it has remained pertinent because they have remade. Diddy is in Raisin in the Sun. Diddy. Got him in there with Felicia Rashad, Cosby Show, and all that. He's still the shiftless one who gives all the money away, so I mean, you know. 605-313-5164. The code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Hopefully the context of white supremacy will remain pertinent in 2025. Let's see. If we missed you totally, hand up now. Do not wait till the last moment if you have commentary. Folks who have a hand up, Lauren, color 9456, everybody with us. I'll look for folks we missed totally. They have commentary questions as well.
May I be heard?
Lauren? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Before I get started talking about this segment, I did have a couple of things to say about, I guess it would have been last week's segment. When Billie Holiday was talking to Guy about strange fruit. Again, I think I said it last week. The use of profanity made what she said sound a bit harsh, but I do think it's correct to explain to a 13-year-old or even a 9-year-old in accurate and precise language about lynching, just that you could be killed and that white people kill black people all the time and they aren't punished. They like to do this sort of thing. Maybe talk to them about racially restricted regions. And also, I was thinking, when she picked him up from school, it was because he was talking about sex, and he said he had a book that talked about, you know, the anatomy and sexual intercourse and stuff. So if you're old enough to have the sex talk with a child, you're old enough for a racism talk. And actually, I think the racism talk should come first, then the sex, in my view. The Stay Black and Die. I know we talked about this, but I thought about it. The thing is, you don't have to do anything. People who are classified as black were classified as black by white people before they were even born, definitely when they were first born. And pretty much everybody dies. So, yeah, you don't have to do anything for both of those things. Just continue existing and you will still be classified as black and you will eventually die. Let's see. Oh, when the people were standing outside that store watching the TV and they saw the black male and they said that African walks like God himself, who was that? They didn't say, but I wondered if it was Patrice Lumumba. Did you think the same thing, Gus?
Who knows? I mean, Kwame Nkrumah, possibility for this time period. Now, I do have to think, let's see, this is like 1959, 1960. Could be Lumumba. Let's see.
Yeah, because he died 61.
It could be. I'd have to think about he would be a good possibility. There are a few other folks in Africa by that time, and they even had some guest people, Ralph Bunche. But he wouldn't. I don't think they'd be saying that about Ralph Bunche. But yeah, he'd be a good possibility.
Okay. Also, you made a comment about black people's tradition about overcoming, and I gotta say, there's that song, "We Shall Overcome," and it seems like lots of black people know that song, and they sing it quite a bit. There's something they sang when they were doing those marches. I think lots of people know that song, "We Shall Overcome." So I kind of do think that's a part of black, if culture is what people do, singing that song is definitely something that black people do. And in this segment, chapter 4, right at the beginning, she says, "I thought Godfrey Cambridge was one of the prettiest men I had ever seen. His features had the immutability of a Benin mask." I don't know if I said that correctly. "And his white teeth were like flags of truce. His skin was the color of rich black dirt along the Arkansas River. He was tall and big and spoke English with the staccato accent of a New York-born descendant of West Indian parents. He was definitely the one." Now, when she said he was definitely the one, I thought, man, she's already brought several males to meet her child. Is that what she thinks every time? And then maybe 2 paragraphs down, she says, "Despite my availability, my cooking, and my willingness, together we ignited no passionate fires. When I let him out of the house, he gave me a brother's kiss, and I scratched him off my list as a possibility." I thought a black male who could be a positive influence without the impermanence that comes along with sexual activity, that might be a better idea than just a continuing line of sex partners. I don't think that's excellent example to set, especially by a female who's attempting to be a parent. Let me see. I don't know. She had that part, as Christians, we shall be ready for change, because if we think about it, Jesus was the greatest changer in history, and the eye for an eye, and the money lenders in the temple. And it said they were cheating the people and taught forgiveness even of one's enemies. Black people forgiving enemies is such a tiresome message. I know I'm tired of it. It seems like lots of other black people who go to church every Sunday are not tired of it, but I'm tired of hearing about it. I don't even go to church, and I have black people talking to me about that nonsense all the time. Then it says, so what's next? What are we going to do about it? Godfrey beat me to the question, and I had no answer. We got to do something. Okay. She says Reverend King needs money, and they have a couple of other sentences. Here's the thing. What are we going to do about it? Okay. Well, this was, what year was it? 1959? So, I guess Mr. Fuller had not come up with the 10 stops, but if someone asked this question today, hey, man, the 10 stops. Stop name calling, stop cursing, stop squabbling amongst one another, stop gossiping, stop snitching, being discourteous, stop robbing, stop stealing, stop fighting, stop killing. Even Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, her editions, stop using and selling drugs to one another, stop throwing trash down where black people live, work, and learn, and stop denying that racism, white supremacy exists. That's number 13, and sometimes I wonder if that should be number 1 on the list. That's an excellent list to start with. And, if you just concentrate on that, that could take you a while. So, let me see. I did notice that Billy Eckstine, they spelled his name the Jewish way in the book, Eckstein, but on the internet, it says Eckstine, Stine. But his parents had the, I'm going to call it the Jewish spelling, with the E-I-N. So I just noticed the inconsistency of the spelling of that name. When she talks to the 2 white men at the, what was it, the SCLC, they're asking questions. How large is the cast? How long do you need for rehearsal? Hey, when somebody's asking you a question like that, give them an answer. All that circuitous speech is not necessary. And if the answer is I don't know, say I don't know. If you think the answer is 2 weeks, hey, multiply that times maybe 3, okay? And I have no idea why she would say 2 weeks if she didn't even have a script. That was so irresponsible and probably untrue. Let me see. Yeah, that might be a lie. Well, again, with the male, she was talking about, John Killens was concretely married. John Clark had another interest and was, in my case, too hard for my liking. Sylvester Leaks had hugged me often but never asked for my phone number. If I had the chance, I could moan some salty songs. I had been living with empty arms and rocks in my bed. Man, black people, I think it would be constructive if we would stop focusing so much on sexual activity. That is not helping. I think we need to focus on other problems and leave that sexual activity for last. And that's all I have right now. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Well, Fuller does say sexual activity twice a week at most. Twice a week, so we don't get too focused. And more importantly, once you have a child, hey, number 1 priority is parenting. Not, man, he ain't got no good prospects. He married and that. Incidentally, that great catch with the spelling of Mr. Eckstein's name, because the album covers, it is absolutely Stine. That's not how it's spelled in the book. I don't know that there might even be a narrative, behind the discrepancy with the spellings. Some of these pictures, Mr. Eckstein looks like he could almost pass. I mean, I know these are pictures. Some of them are black and white. A lot of them are black and white. But I mean, he is not the darkest person in the room. I think she said he could get certain property in California because he could lie and say he's Portuguese or something like that. Like, wow. I mean, wow. Like, if he could do something with that hair, maybe close cropped hair, stay out of the sun, maybe, like, wow, he is not the the darkest person. He is no Nat King Cole. Let's see. Other folks who dialed in, much obliged. Lauren, 9456, with us as well.
Greetings, Mr. Renegade. So I was just looking at some photos of Billy Eckstein, and I guess I disagree because he seems melanated enough to be definitely not classified as white, and I would assume that people would classify him as black, but that's just my perception. Just reading here, it definitely shows that Maya Angelou was focused on wanting a man at this time in her life, and I guess I didn't really think that she had seriously thought about Killens, who was a married man. So I don't know if she was just tossing out men she knew, or has she considered a relationship with him? I wasn't quite sure how that was written. And then I guess, when I was thinking about the man she was having the sexual relationship with, I look back at her son and, what does that say? And speaking of him again, I just kind of wonder if there was any resentment towards her. I mean, considering at least at this stage of this reading, he was the only one working, and so his money is paying the bills for this. And it just seems that while they seem to have a close relationship, there certainly has to be some sort of resentment or I don't know, just because the parent-child relationship is different between those two. Let's see. I guess, victims guarantee qualified. I disagree with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He had made the comment, he said the South in his speech, we might remember, is gone. There was a new South, a more violent, ugly South. I guess, just my perception of history in the South was that it was always a pretty violent and ugly place, and maybe it is being highlighted more just because black people are resisting racism during this time, but I hardly see that it's really different. That's why a lot of folks who are in New York at this meeting are there, because they went to escape that South. And I guess, also just the, I didn't grow up during those times. Much younger, but just to see and to hear the passion that non-white black people had for fighting against racism, white supremacy during that time. I know that they weren't quite organized. Gothic Cambridge and Maya Angelou at the beginning trying to do something, but to organize that play, but they wanted to do something, and people were genuinely moved at that speech given by the SCLC to fight against injustice in this country, and that's not something that I've witnessed in my lifetime. So that's all I have.
You haven't witnessed that sort of impassioned speechifying about justice in your lifetime?
Not the speechifying. I would say the reaction to by those crowds. It just seems at a different level. And maybe I'm, Victims Guarantee qualified, but it just seems that, there was at that time a desire to do something against racist white supremacy, unlike now. Maybe that's just my perception.
I see. Thank you for the additional information. Well, this will be grand. As I said, this is a 7-part autobiography series. This is number 4 of 7. Now, I thought we might have both the assassination of Lumumba in this book and the assassination of Minister Malcolm X. I was wrong. And she lived such a dense life, and this is such a dense time period. We only get Lumumba in this book, his assassination. The assassination of Malcolm X, that doesn't pop up until book 6. So she has a whole nother book of details, a lot of which details her contact with Minister Malcolm X. That takes up a whole book before she gets to a whole nother book, where then we get to the death of Malcolm X. And that would be a great point to see now, does this hold true? There were lots of black people who were serious about doing something about white supremacy, racism. Snapshot 1965. Now I would submit you could take a lot of other snapshots. Many people have talked about this before, but hey, we can just stick with the exact same person. So does that seem to be the case? At critical points of 1965, does it seem like that's true from what Dr. Angelou wrote? Book 6. Any hoodles. Certainly there's some pictures where Mr. Eckstein, he looks, touch of the tar brush, but I don't know. Some of these Victims Guarantee qualified, as he said, just some of these, and it, the lighting, they're black and white, these are not HD images. But just some of these images, like, man, he looks Clark Gable, Gone with the Wind. Like, tell him you're Italian, you got grandparents in Italy, you tan easy, and stay out of the sun. But yeah, certainly some of these pictures he looks a little more melanin than others. But Clark Gable, that's my cousin, Let's see, email number 2. Greetings, Gus, listeners, callers. Regarding the phrase, all I need to do is stay black and die, I've heard this phrase and have interpreted it as a term of defiance used by black people against other black people. Now that is wild, because this is just, you don't tell me what to do, nigga. They're gone with the wind. Quitting time, you don't say quitting time. Shut up. I say it's quitting time. Wow. That is so sad. He continues, might be a form of racial shadow fighting, using Mr. Fuller's terminology of racial shadow boxing. For example, this is hypothetical scenario. Victim, black attempted job supervisor. Jamal, you're going to have to clean up that spill on aisle 8 before clocking out. Victim, co-worker Jamal, all I have to do is stay black and die. Now, that is how it was used in the book. Billie Holiday was talking to other black people. And they were going to negotiate, the dinner and all that. When she going, I have to do nothing. Stay black and die. I do not hear black people tell white people generally. All I got to do is stay black and die. Crackers, they might say, hey, we can help you out with that last part. Get the noose ready, boys. Stay black and die. Who is this nigga? It doesn't work with white people the same at all. Chapter 2. Black Mother, Beyond the Door. Oh, this is the one we do. The power of white power, that passage. Hardest job in the known universe. I cannot really say this is like an illustration of how to do that job well. I can't even really say it's much of an attempt to do that job well as lots of folks have illustrated. 2, Scrabble. Of all the whiteboard games, this may be one of the most constructive ones. Hey, use of words might even help you with some writing vocabulary so you don't go around foul-mouthed, filth-foreign. 3, Harlem Writers Guild was meeting at John's house, loosely formed organization without dues or membership cards. This seems like a constructive group. The group is still in existence today. That's crazy. I checked out their website, and it seems it is much more structured as an organization, and membership is restricted. 4, John Henrik Clarke, historian, intellectual, professor, pioneer of Pan-African and African studies, author of the book The Boy Who Painted Jesus Black. Did talks with Neely Fuller Jr. too. 5, John Henrik Clarke's solemn face. In this group, we remind each other that talent is not enough. You've got to work. Write each sentence over and over until it seems you've used every combination possible, then write it again. Publishers don't care much for white writers. He coughed or laughed. You can imagine what they think about black ones. Seems like good advice. I agree. 6, Paul Marshall, whose book Brown Girl, Brown Stone was going to be made into a television movie. Age 90, awarded MacArthur Fellowship Genius Grant. She died in 2019. 7, Tom thanked the slave owner and went back to his cabin. Most of us had been Toms at different times of our lives. Most of us, or maybe all of us, all the time. Toms being non-white victims submitting to the power of the global system of racism, white supremacy, either directly or indirectly. 8, I thought of my mother putting her age back 15 years and going into the Merchant Marines. I had to try. If I ended in defeat, at least I would be trying to overcome was black people's honorable tradition. I'm going to have to think about that last sentence. Not sure what it means. That's what I said. Even that word honorable, like, I don't know if there's much honorable about being a victim of white supremacy. Like, yeah, I have to at least take that out. You just say, trying to overcome is black people's tradition. Honorable, there's nothing honorable about being a victim of white supremacy. Even trying to overcome it is not honorable. Or yeah, you can work to overcome it, but yeah, being a victim, just all of that, no honor. 3, no audience participation. Is that your policy, Mr. Schiffman? The only policy at the Apollo is be good. I'm telling you, no audience participation. I've never been at a live performance at the Apollo, but the audiences seem notoriously rude to performers based on what I have read and seen on TV and movie depictions. I have never been to the Apollo, but I mean, from what I've seen, they have the Sandman. He brings the hook and snatches people off stage, and they revel in this. I'm only bringing it up because I did work at a black club, and they did the same thing. They reveled. They love to heckle black people. Name call black people. That was the most fun. Negro culture. That's why I said it's hard for me to... And I've even heard that name calling and Red Fox is honorable. You big dummy. Getting on with it. 2, Michaud's Bookshop, bookstore founded in 1932, was forced to move in 1968 to give way for a state office building and eventually forced to close in 1974. Not trying to endorse reading. 3, I also knew that fewer people giggled or poked the sides of their neighbors when they noticed my natural hairstyle. Early adopter of natural hairstyle similar to Dr. Welsing. 4, Schiffman had been right and wrong. Some people sang and better than I, but no one laughed me off the stage. The Schiffman family suspected racists were in control of the Apollo Theater since 1935. It was originally a burlesque house. Jesus Christ. And vaudeville establishment. Minstrel. with acts such as blackface, Al Jolson, and comedy acts such as the Marx Brothers in 1914 as a whites-only establishment. When the Schiffman family took it over in 1935, they transformed it into a venue for black artists and black audiences. In the 1970s, it closed and was later reopened as a non-profit organization with financial assistance from the state of New York, white people. Chapter 4, I thought Godfrey Cambridge was one of the prettiest men. Died in 1976, died of a heart attack while filming Victory at Antibes about Idi Amin, known for movies such as Cotton Comes to Harlem and Watermelon Man, about a white bigot who wakes up one day transformed into a black male. That is his son. Why am I messing? Melvin Van Peebles. There we go. He just passed away. Melvin Van Peebles' film, Watermelon Man. It is wacky. Melvin Van Peebles is in that film too. I'm not sure most people during the time period of his career would have described him as pretty. 260. Yawping definition: noisy, harsh, or strident utterance. Martin Luther King Jr. He said the South we might remember is gone. There was a new South, a more violent, ugly South, a country where white brothers and sisters were terrified of change. VGQ. I don't think this is accurate. More violent than the Wilmington Massacre, lynchings, etc. 4. Bayard Rustin. He and Dr. King were planning a civil rights march outside of the 1960 Democratic Party National Convention. U.S. Representative Adam Clayton Powell learned of this and threatened to start a false rumor that Rustin and King were engaged in an anti-sexual relationship. Rustin was known to be engaged in an anti-sexual lifestyle. King subsequently canceled the protest, and this may have led to Rustin leaving the SCLC, an organization that he helped to found. This is from Wikipedia, and thus I cannot attest to its accuracy. 5. Levinson. Jack Murray had sounded black, but he was as white as Stanley Levinson. I wonder what type of black he sounded like. Reminds me of the Zebra murders. He ran like a Negro. In the final analysis, white people still in charge. 6. That's why we are full-time volunteers at SCLC, because we understand. Or maybe spies for the FBI keeping an eye on your niggras. That's what I thought. Like, woo, who even has the time, money, resource to be full-time volunteers, and you're white people? You are Mr. Spingern. Same thing in the NAACP. What Dr. Kenneth O'Reilly, FBI secret file on their niggras, that's exactly what I thought. Full-time. We even got overtime. Here as long as you need us. No problem. Front row. 7. We've got a new show, a cabaret. He had a taxi door. I shouted, we'll call it Cabaret for Freedom, okay? The title of the show seems a little contradictory. You can't boogaloo and sing for freedom? Nah. Poo on all that. Anyway, let's see. Let me get a few of my thoughts in before we wrap all up. We'll pick back up next week. Let's see. Wait a minute. The Village Gate closed in 1994. Art Lugoff, suspected racist, marched with Dr. King, Selma to Montgomery, if that means anything to anybody. Let's see. Making sure I didn't miss any of the... Okay, we're good. Make sure I get commentary from this section before we wrap up. What did I think was important? Raisin in the Sun I already got. They made like so many generations of black people read that play or see it. It was ubiquitous. You had to read it in school for some generations, or you saw the play, or Diddy popped up on TV doing it like just like Porgy and Bess. They said the actors, they'll be thrilled to do Cabaret for Freedom because they've been out of work since Porgy and Bess closed. Reminded me of Dr. Welsing, like, all right, we do 3 or 4 seasons of the niggers singing, I got plenty of nothing and nothing's good enough for me. That's another hit single from Porgy and Bess. And then once that's done, we ain't got nothing else for you now. When we do the 20-year reunion for Porgy, we'll give you all a call. Until then, beat it. just like today. Let's see. When she said they were going to go and meet, I guess she was expecting to go meet with Bayard Rustin, and it ended up being these white people that she was meeting with, and she was, a little nervous. I think that still happens for many non-white people under the system of white supremacy, being anxious, nervous about talking to white people. That's why we do the cows, white guests only. And it is a little bit childish. You're going to organize and raise money for this group that is, going out and doing all these events and what have you all across the country, and you haven't even really seriously thought, like, how many people? What's even like a rough outline of this? Like, maybe Bayard Rustin would have had some of these same questions to like have. Yes, it probably would be better to have some good answers to all this. Maybe give a trial run where I can crank out some answers to all of these types of questions, even if you're still in the early stages, better than, I got to make up some sort of lie on the spot, or I don't know, which, hey, that's honest, but dang, I think that's a lot of, have you really given any thought to this? And she even said, we just had emotional conversation. Man, that is a lot of the way that black people talk about white supremacy, racism. Dare I say, with this book, the word love is on 71 pages of this book. I can give you the exact times it's in the book. I just, was looking at different format, but it's on 71 pages in a book that's not very long. Racism is on 1, 2, 3, 4 pages. Now that white power paragraph, racism isn't there. That's super important. Racism just isn't said explicitly, but I mean, she's talking about it all the time, but I'm just saying, love, 71 pages, God knows how many times. Racism, 4 pages. Replace white supremacy with love. I didn't know what sounding black meant either. Mr. Levinson, she talked about being surprised that he was a white person. She said, I dreamed of confronting an entire country of bigots when facing a lone white man threw me into confusion. That is still lots of us non-white people. And sometimes that's really all it takes is one white person and we are in shambles. And something that doesn't have to be a white person with a firearm or anything. Just one white person can be super scary enough. Fuller said he used to have a black fella who told a joke. They would get the name, this is other black people, they would get the name calling him and heckling him and, you don't know what you're doing, shut up, coon. He said, hey, back up now, I know a white person. And they would all laugh. They said, now, that might be something to consider. Let's get Fuller. Shut up, Fuller, you old coon, Fuller, you don't know no white people. Shut up, Fuller. And they get on him, see. Let's see. Everybody's broke after Porgy and Bess. Even when they said they saw Dr. King and the black female grabbed her and looked at her as if they were old friends and said, if I never draw another breath, I could die. That is so, like, out of this world incorrect. Like, I wouldn't care who the person is. Like, insert name. Fuller, John Henry Clark, insert name. Nikki Giovanni, Obama, insert name. I mean, Clarence Thomas. That is so incorrect. Like, what? I am a victim of white supremacy racism. That is not the end-all be-all. Certainly not. I got to be in the presence of another victim of racism? No. Justice, something. Even people who said, I have seen Obeezy in the White House. I can die. No. That is total incorrect thinking. Replace white supremacy with justice. Now I can die. Total incorrect thinking. And there's been a lot of that through the decades. Well, we have not solved this problem. White people don't need to be made aware of racism. That is the talk about incorrect thinking. They had cognac-laced coffee. Sobriety would be best. I can leave it there. Yeah, we'll pick up next week. Sobriety would be bad. Isn't it fly? We will be reading this here book for the King holiday. I don't think it's long enough that we'll make it to Malcolm X assassination on the 21st of next month. But, oh yeah, King holiday, reading it. Much obliged for folks who tuned in, hopefully worthy of your January 2 New Year. You could be toasting and champagne and partying in 2025. We are here reading Dr. Maya Angelou, autobiography number 4. Be back next week with more. Be here tomorrow for Neutralizing Workplace Racism, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Sobriety, no cognac, laced coffee, eggnog, champagne. Sobriety would be best. Model that for your children. That'll be their memory. Yeah. My attempted pa and dad, they didn't even do all that drinking for New Year. They were even teetotalers then. They said, hey, sobriety would be bad. You know, they got the sobriety checkpoint. That's what they used to say. They got the sobriety checkpoint. So, no, we don't do the drink for the New Year. That's how we grew up. Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of white supremacy. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. No name-calling black people, even if they're on a stage, maybe especially if they're on a stage. Even Obama, even Kamala Harris. No name-calling black people, no name-calling non-white people, victims of white supremacy. Got to cover all bases if you're going to use Obama and Kamala Harris. So no name-calling non-white people, victims of white supremacy. No gossiping, no throwaway offspring. Man, guy was kind of thrown away a few times. I shouldn't be laughing about that, but woo, he was thrown away a few times in this here book. Like, man, Cal signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. Problem. You're a victim. Yeah. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my condition. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.